Grown up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. As part of my responsibilities to ensure the fitness of nominees before any of the committees on which I sit, I asked the following two initial questions. First is, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator, I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I have not.
We received your testimony late yesterday, and you noted that, and quote, President Trump's energy dominance vision will end wars abroad, end quote. And President Trump has directed you to expand oil and gas drilling on a massive scale, which will lead to increased burning of fossil fuels. Now, the scientific consensus is that burning fossil fuels is a primary human cause of climate change. In 2017, then Secretary of Defense James Mattis, appointed by then President Trump, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that, quote, climate change is impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating, end quote. In 2014, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel said that climate change is a critical national security threat and a threat multiplier. Now, these are two secretaries of defense. They know something about war. Were you aware that they testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on a number of times that burning more fossil fuel is actually going to not result in the end of wars, but could very well exacerbate and cause wars? Were you aware of this testimony?
Senator, no, I'm not aware of that specific testimony, but I do know that, that within fossil fuels, the concern has been about emissions, and within emissions, we have the technology to do things like carbon capture to eliminate harmful emissions.
Well, the fact of the matter is that you have military leaders who acknowledge that climate change is a major issue. And for you to take the position that, that you're going to engage in active actions that will result in the burning of more fossil fuel, it's troubling.
Senator Hoeven.
I think that interchange demonstrates the kind of really high-level discussion that Governor Burgum brings to these issues. I mean, he really will work through these issues and applies a real analytical approach to problem solving. I think that's really important for both sides of the aisle. I think that's something that people are going to very much appreciate about him. Federal law requires that, that on public lands there be multiple use. Recently, the BLM promulgated rules that violate that law very clearly, in my opinion. Do you support multiple use on federal lands? And I think I know you do, but I want you to express it for the record. And then I want you to tell us why it's so important that we have multiple use on public lands, not just in our state, but across this country.
Well, thank you, Senator Hoeven. The answer is obviously yes, but this is the public lands, and particularly when we talk about aspects of BLM, this is essential to local economies, and whether that's grazing rights that were part of this, whether it's recreation opportunities and access, whether it's timber, or whether it's oil and gas and mineral production that supports local economies and supports our country. This is what this land was put away for: the benefit, the use, and the enjoyment of the American people. Not every acre of federal land is a national park or a wilderness area. Some of those areas we have to absolutely protect for their precious stuff, but the rest of it, this is America's balance sheet. And I think every American during a presidential campaign finds out and gets pounded into their head that we've got $36 trillion in debt. We got all this debt. Oh, Americans, you owe part of this national debt, $36 trillion. This is on you. We never talk about the assets, and the assets are the land and minerals. This agency in Interior, the Department of Interior, has got close to 500 million acres of surface, 700 million acres of subsurface, and over 2 billion acres of offshore. 2 billion. That's the balance sheet of America. And if we were a company, they would look at us and say, wow, you are really restricting your balance sheet. And do you know what those assets are worth? We don't. I believe we ought to have a deep inventory of all the assets in America, we ought to understand maybe what are our assets, 100 trillion, 200 trillion? We could be in great shape as a country. But then if you said, wow, if we have 200 trillion in assets just sitting there, but we restrict access, we don't cut a tree, we don't use them for recreation, and then we don't develop the minerals sustainably in a smart way, then we're getting super low return for the American people. It's our responsibility to get a return for the American people when we do that. When we did that in North Dakota, you started it as governor. On the land board, we've got, in our little state, we got a $12 billion endowment for K-12 for about 125,000 kids. I mean, we got an endowment bigger than most universities in the country for our K-12 system because we learned how to utilize this stuff. And guess what? We still have among the cleanest air, cleanest water, greatest recreation in the nation. This is the time of abundance. We can do all of it.
Yeah, and so it really is about working with people in all these different uses. And that's true with working with, in Indian country on the reservations as well, right? Empowering the local tribe, to decide, make those decisions about how they use the land and all the beneficial ways that they can, right?
Yes, well, in our state, I mean, MHA Nation, the Mandan, Hidatsa, Rikra, the 3 affiliated tribes, one of the great energy tribes in our country. These guys are, I say, the hardest job in America. It's not being a governor or a senator. The hardest job in America is a tribal chairman because you get a whole nother layer of federal bureaucracy on top of you. And they show up at MHA and they say, hey, you guys are doing too much flaring. And then they say, well, we wouldn't be if you'd give us a permit to actually do a gas gathering line. So the same government that tells them they can't produce, that they're flaring too much, won't give them the permit to do the thing that we can do in the rest of the state. So they get constrained.
In addition to serving as Secretary of Interior, there's also the role as the leader of the National Energy Council, very important. Talk for a minute, for the time we have left, and you might even go over a little bit. The chairman's really a good guy. So talk about how you implement a game plan to achieve that goal of energy dominance that President Trump wants for this nation.
Well, again, I think I don't want to get caught in making forward-looking statements because the council will be formed by an EO, but I think that the intention, as you can read in President Trump's public statements, are he's very simple. He wants to cut red tape. He wants to have more affordable energy for us. He wants to sell energy to our friends and allies so they don't have to buy it from our adversaries. That's how we reduce tensions in the world. And then we've got to make sure that we're doing it in a smart way because he talks all the time about clean air, clean water. So he's basically talking about the approach that we're talking about here at this committee. This committee will be deeply involved in helping set those policies, but it's an all of above, go get it done, and stop getting in the way of ourselves. And particularly with this the AI battle, people don't understand that what's coming right now with AI revolution is going to happen during President Trump's term, where when we have generalized intelligence that we can manufacture, it's going to affect our ability to compete with every other power. And China they permitted more than 2 coal plants a week in the first half of 2023. And they're already the world's largest emitter. So we're competing against someone who's going to create more electricity, produce more AI, and this could be how we lose the Cold War with them if we don't get it on. We have to do it here, and we're a country that believes in reclamation. We believe in following labor laws. China, child labor, no reclamation, no care about the environment. They're a tough competitor right now in terms of their ability to produce electricity. So we've got to get going, and we've got to cut red tape, and we've got to realize that if you shut down U.S. energy production here, it doesn't help the global environment. That's a false trade-off. It doesn't help because somebody else produces it someplace else, less cleaner than we do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor, good to see you again. Appreciate the time in my office a few weeks back, and greetings to your wife, Catherine. We can't do the jobs that we do without the support and love of our spouses. My time is limited, and not sure if we have a second round. There's a number of issues that I'm going to try to get to. If I don't, I'll be submitting questions for the records. Issues like tribal sovereignty that's come up before, and your thoughts on our trust and treaty obligations as a country. Public lands, we've had some recent progress and exciting announcements in California that we'd like to continue to build on and not go backwards on. Try to get to some water system, but let me begin with some of the more urgent questions and issues. in California, Los Angeles specifically. As we've all seen the devastation of recent fires in Southern California. As we speak here today, more than 40,000 acres burned, 12,000 structures plus destroyed, more than 24 people who have perished. That number is probably going to grow. It's clear it's been one of the most destructive natural disasters in Los Angeles history. As governor, you had an experience, not at this scale, but in 2024, you requested a major disaster declaration to assist in the recovery from the historic wildfires that ravaged across northwest North Dakota. And President Biden, as I understand, approved it quickly and without conditions. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do you believe federal disaster aid should come with or without conditions?
Well, I think it's each situation would vary. But first of all, let me just say that I want to extend on behalf of Catherine and I, our empathy and sympathy to anybody that's lost their home, lost their lives, lost a loved one. We've got friends that have lived in the area that have lost their homes, homes they raised their kids in for 30 years, every piece of memorabilia and memory that they had gone, only getting out with a shirt on their back and talking to those individuals directly. And as it happens, our daughter was in L.A. For an event. The event was canceled. Catherine had flown out there, so both of them also had to evacuate as the fires were encroaching in that part of the city. So our family, part of our family saw it firsthand. And again, it's just urban wildfire is something that we, as a country, we need to think. And I say each situation is different because where you talked about in North Dakota was largely rural, largely grasslands.
And I'll get to that because you've experienced both. But please extend my offer to support, assist in any way any of my constituents that are friends or relatives of your family. For the record, there's never been strings attached to disaster relief. And I certainly hope this is not the first case. So I would ask, as this plays out in Congress over the next several months, if you're fortunate enough to be confirmed as Interior Secretary, you wouldn't be the one deciding on whether or not to grant disaster declarations, but the department is significant, particularly when it comes to wildfire response. Would you commit to responding to every disaster with as much support and resources possible, regardless of which state or jurisdiction the disaster is in?
Well, absolutely, but I would say I would go a step further, which is we've got to commit to, and maybe it's going to take, apparently the fire in Maui wasn't big enough, in a sense. I mean, that was horrible, 100+ lives lost, the devastation that's there, but it didn't create a response nationally or at the federal level or a collaboration of states. But with this incredible, the largest ever, and when the dollars come up, this could be the most expensive urban wildfire in the history of the country. It's probably a time for all of us together to say, what could we be doing differently? And I'm excited that Tim Sheehy is a new senator. He's the first that I know of who's actually worked as a professional firefighter on wildfire. I know that he and others are willing to work across the aisle to come up with solutions.
And Senator Sheehan and I are already working on some proposals on a bipartisan basis to improve the federal government's ability to help in situations like these.
And if I could, Senator, I would say we also have to look. It goes back to actually the grid, because if you wildfire, whether it's in North Dakota or California, you need three things. You need oxygen, you need fuel load, and you need a spark. And in both cases, in North Dakota and in whatever, when you have high winds, those sparks can come from above ground power lines coming in contact with vegetation. And so we have to think about the grid and
I love that you have that
lines.
Appreciation and knowledge, and unfortunately the experience, because red flag conditions is something new to people across the country, but nothing new for those of us in the very dry West. My time is running quickly. I want to get at least one other issue in on the record.
As Secretary of the Interior, it is your duty to see that the department carries out its mission to protect and manage our nation's natural resources and cultural heritage. If you are ordered by the President to act in a manner that is counter to the department's mission, or to the Constitution, such as drilling in Bear Ears National Monument? Will you do as the president asked? Because he wants to drill in that monument.
Well, Senator, of course, as part of my sworn duty, I'll follow the law and follow the Constitution, and so you can count on that. And I have not heard of anything about President Trump wanting to do anything
Well, he
other
certainly wants to.
than advancing energy production for the benefit of the American people.
We all
in a
know
legal
that
way.
the president wants to drill, baby, drill. And in your testimony, you say that he has a energy dominance vision. So I would ask you that, should you be confirmed, that you will have these kinds of matters that you'll have to decide. Are you going to drill in a monument? Are you going to protect our natural resources? Or are you going to drill, baby, drill? So I raise that as a concern with you going forward. Compacts of free association. Last year, Congress renewed our compacts of free association, and that comes within the purview of Interior. It involves Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. I would like to get your commitment to implement the new compacts of free association in accordance with the bipartisan law that was enacted last year.
Well, Senator, these Pacific Islands, in addition to the three that you mentioned that are part of the compact, but also the others that are under the insular areas of Interior, are all critically important to national security for the United States of America. All of them have important military implications. All of these are places where U.S. sailors fought and died during World War II. And with the aggression that China is showing in the Pacific, it's more important that we support them more than ever. I know that Hawaii plays an important role, including in things like with medical care for those residents of those islands, and I think it's important that the federal government does its share as opposed to putting the load on the state.
Thank you. It sounds as though you have familiarity with the compacts, for which I am gratified. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Justice.
I've got, my questions are going to be short and sweet, but I can tell you just this, that I think we share in the fact that energy is the key. Energy, oh gosh, I don't have my mic on. Okay. Well, okay. Good enough. I'm talking loud enough anyway. But nevertheless, energy is such a key that opens every door. In my opinion, every single door. And the world is starving for us, America, to lead the way. And I believe we share that thought. I believe we share the thought that electricity, if we don't watch out, will become a crisis like we can't imagine. And we absolutely need to be prepared and move forward in that. But we've got a problem along the way. Permitting has gotten totally outrageous. And absolutely, we all want it to be fair and proper and not endanger our environment. We all share in that. But absolutely, I ask you, Governor, I ask you, please, tell us your thoughts on how we're going to approach this, how we're going to approach this, the issues with fish and wildlife, and on and on and on. Please tell us.
Well, I should say, Governor, now Senator, so great that you're here in the Senate, and what a fantastic job you did as governor, and it was a pleasure serving alongside of you as another energy state. You've got everything, just you get that we are in an energy crisis in our country, and the first place is actually related to electricity. Electricity is at the brink. Our grid is at a point where it could go completely unstable. We could be just months away from having skyrocketing prices for Americans. And of course, as we talked about in the AI arms race, we need electricity for manufacturing, and AI is manufacturing intelligence. And if we don't manufacture more intelligence than our adversaries, it affects every job, every company, and every industry. You understand this, and we've got to get to work. The permitting right now, in some of the queues in FERC for electricity, it's 7 years or longer. And it's a completely, that queue in FERC is 95% intermittent sources and only 5% baseload. We need baseload to be able to allow the renewables to be part of the system. We've got to have the balance between those two, or the grid, which is like a giant machine, just doesn't work. And so we've got to get to work. And permitting reform and speeding permitting. Right now, we've stacked the deck where we are creating roadblocks for people that want to do baseload, and we've got massive tax incentives for people that want to do intermittent and unreliable when the balance is out of whack, and we've got to bring it back in line. And we can do that and still achieve the objectives that we want to have about having cleaner environment, because the U.S. has done that. We are the one nation on the planet that's actually reduced CO2 over the last 20 years. We're the ones that have done it. China's doubled their CO2 emissions in the same time frame.
Well, thank you, sir, and thank you for your kind comments as well. Now, if I could just ask one more question and just shift just a little bit. We all know the outdoors touches our soul, and I'm an outdoorsman like crazy. I have enjoyed hunting and fishing all across this nation, but especially in my home state of West Virginia. And I welcome you to come to West Virginia to experience that just what I'm speaking of. But I would just say just this. We have an attack on our sport of hunting and fishing. You know, hunters absolutely do so much to contribute to all the goodness all across all of our lands, to all the wildlife, to all the different things that happen within the sport of hunting. And I know you share, my love just as much as I know my love. With all that being said, what will you do to ensure that we will perpetuate this unbelievable tradition to our youth and all those to come? What will you do, sir?
Well, Senator, in North Dakota, we've taken steps, as I know other states have done, to create youth hunting seasons, youth hunter education, make it more available, create more opportunities, as we have also done for disabled and wounded veterans. But when we have public lands and we've got public access, the greatest conservationists in our country, and some are probably listening today, but whether it's the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Mule Deer, Pheasants Forever, Ducks Unlimited, you name any of these organizations, they're the ones that raise the money that actually pour dollars into conservation in this country. Hunters, the Safari Club, all of these different groups, and of course, President Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, one of the founders of Boone and Crockett. I mean, he was a hunter who also set the ethic for conservation for our country. And so these two things go hand in hand. You cannot separate hunting from the love of outdoors, respect for wildlife, and dollars that flow back into habitat and making sure that we've got we've got the privilege of hunting for the public. It doesn't matter who you are. In North Dakota, you can get a $20 tag and go on a hunt that's just as amazing as if you were, going to Africa. I mean, it is a miracle that we have in this country, one of the few countries that has that, something we have to fight and protect to preserve.
Thank you, sir. And I've only got just one other comment. President Trump is bringing to us amazing nominees. But in my book, this man, just think just for 1 second. He's super smart. His track record's unbelievable. He has experience off the chart. If anybody is the pick of the litter, it's got to be this man. He's done an amazing job. But he's got courage like you can't imagine. Just think about this. He stood on one leg at the debate, and absolutely with a torn Achilles. And I've been a coach forever in basketball, and I've seen kids get a torn Achilles, and absolutely it is one serious injury. How you did this, I will never know. But nevertheless, I give him kudos for courage beyond belief. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to associate myself with your comments, Mr. Chairman, on determining the asset value of what we own. It's astounding that that doesn't exist. And one of the things that would contribute to, as we discussed previously, is adequate maintenance budgets. If you know the asset value, there are sort of standard industry percentages that should be applied in order to determine a maintenance budget. So I believe that's an important step. I presume you believe climate change is a problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that climate change is a global phenomenon for sure.
I noted the biographical material that in 2021 as governor, you set a goal for North Dakota of carbon neutrality by 2030 to be achieved in a variety of ways. And as you mentioned, you've really worked hard on the carbon neutrality of fossil fuel extraction and fossil fuel use. I'm a little worried today, though. You keep distinguishing between intermittent and baseload. Would you agree that renewable resources, solar and wind, for example, can be developed if they are adequately, if they can be integrated into the grid in a safe and reliable way?
Yes, they can, and it's not for me personally for any political reasons that I distinguish. It's just because of physics, the physics of the grid. If we don't have enough base load, and it's the base load that we have that's allowed our nation to make the investments into the intermittent.
I don't want the word. In a former life, I developed both base load and intermittent resources. I don't want the word base load to be code for no renewables. That's not what you're saying, is it?
No, we need a balance, but they cannot. The intermittent, if you want to call them renewables, is used as a positive word, but this is a fact of life, is they're intermittent. And when they're intermittent, until we have storage solutions, and we're years away from having significant enough cost-effective storage to support that, we need to have the base load, or the intermittent doesn't even have a life.
But it can be integrated. In your case in North Dakota, 35% of your electricity comes from wind power. I presume your grid works.
Well, it's super stressed as it is around the country. We're in parts of two grids. We're part of MISO going east, and we're part of SPP going west. And you can have days when the rated capacity is 30, but you got a day when the wind's blowing. The wind's blowing so hard it drives all the base load off of production. And then the next day it's 20 below and there's no wind blowing, and we got no wind, and then you got to like crank up the base load again. And so
that's one of the most important reasons that we've talked about innovation. We need to work on storage. You would agree, I think, that renewables or intermittents, whatever you want to call them, plus storage equals baseload.
Yes, but right now at a much higher cost. And so then, of course, we want to have not only have it be reliable, we also want to have it be affordable. And so that's part of what we have to look at as a nation: is what cost are we willing to take on to try to achieve those goals. And I believe in if it's all of the above, if we can decarbonize traditional fuels cheaper than we can subsidize some of the renewables, then that should be looked at fairly and equitably and economically, because that's a better path forward for every citizen if we can do it more affordably.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but we've talked a lot about innovation, and I'm a great believer in American innovation. And the cost, for example, of solar panels has gone from, I don't know, $70 a kilowatt down to 70 cents. I mean, battery storage, for example, in Maine, there is a project underway for an 85 megawatt, 100-hour grid scale storage at a reasonable cost, because it's not based on lithium ion, or it's based on iron. And so if we're moving into a period where innovation, I believe, will bring storage down. And of course, as you know, wind and solar are the cheapest forms of energy today on a levelized basis, understanding that storage and backup is part of that calculation. But I hope that you'll work with the Department of Energy. Mr. Wright was here yesterday, and one of his business interests was in geothermal and batteries. So I just, when I hear base load used sometimes in these contexts, it sounds like no more renewables. I don't think that's a sustainable path for this country, and it's certainly not a way of meeting the challenge of climate change, which you've acknowledged is a serious one.
No, we need all forms of electricity, and we need more of it in the very near term. And so this is not about one versus the other. This is about how do we drive forward and increase the amount of electricity we have in the country. So I'm a both, all of the above in terms of our approach on how we do it, but we got to do it in a way that's we have affordability and reliability. On the storage side, there is a future, but having been in tech for 30 years, batteries get better at about 2% a year, and that's what it's been for 30 or 40 years. And there's no breakthrough that's coming. Yes, it's improving, but it's not like the microchip, which doubles in power.
It may not be Moore's law, but I think the amount of resources that are going into this research at the Department of Energy and in other places, and the development of this iron-based grid-scale storage, there are.
Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Burgum, congratulations on your nomination, and I hope to run through a couple of questions here, so help me out in your brevity if possible. I know the ranking member anyway, and maybe even the chairman brought up our beautiful outdoor economy, which we've heard from your senator that apparently you're a big outdoorsman yourself. But not only will we become steward of over 20% of the land in the United States, but some of the most beautiful, iconic places in America. And these are an economic juggernaut. They are in my state, if you think about Mount Rainier or Olympic National Park or the Hanford Reach or many other places. The outdoor rec economy generates $1.2 trillion in economic output every year, $1.2 trillion, and accounts for 5 million jobs. And I believe continues to grow at an incredible clip that when you think about economic development in some of our more rural communities, it doesn't take a lot to add a little bit of infrastructure, and then next thing you know, you're off to the races as to making a tourism and an economic impact to these economies. I think in North Dakota, it was your third largest industry, generating $1 billion and 14,000 jobs, and you actually created an office of outdoor recreation. Good for you. Good for you. So I think you get it. But now when we talk about this oil, first I want to make sure on the public lands, will you support more input in outdoor recreation economies and gateway communities? And will you fully utilize the LWCF and support the conservation legacies bills that we've passed?
Well, of course, first of all, in your comments on outdoor recreation, I agree completely on the importance of this. And it's not only good for the economy, it's also good for the health of Americans. I mean, I think one thing that we understand is that we just need more people to get off their devices, get outdoors, get engaged, understand the importance of our land, our wildlife, our soil health, all that aspects of it. And again, we are facing a mental health and addiction crisis in our country, and part of the answer is for many people is that getting that connection back to the outdoors. So support that completely, and would look forward to working with you on your other issues as well.
Great. So you support the LWCF that we've passed in continuing to support those funds?
Some of those acronyms I'm less familiar with, so I'd look forward to learning more about them. But
okay. Well, we'll get you a question for the record because it's vitally important. We believe we think we broke through finally, and the reason why I'm asking this is because the lead up to the next question.
Okay.
You're for this very aggressive oil and lease strategy, I think, or maybe you're going to take this helm over, with a group of people and say we need to do more on the oil and gas. Part of our efforts have been to show that these federal lands are very important in an outdoor economy, and so how many areas that we've already leased for oil and gas that aren't being used, why don't we start there? Why don't we just start with those, the leases that are already there? Why don't we start with that?
Well, I think I would use the term that I was for aggressive. I've never stated that. I'm for following the law. In the current administration in North Dakota, for the first time since Harry Truman, the quarterly lease sales were not held as required by law. It didn't happen for 2 years. We ended up having to sue the federal government just to follow the law. So I think the starting place is for us to go back to follow the law on these, and then again, we always want to prioritize those areas that have the most resource opportunity for America with the least impact on lands that are important. And I think that's pretty simple formula to be able to figure that out, given the scale of the amount of public lands we have. We can do a lot more without touching or even being visible to any of the people that are concerned about land use.
So you would prioritize the existing leases?
I'm not sure if I understand the.
Juxtaposed to, this conversation, which we've had many times in this committee, let's expand more leases that, that we don't have right now. I'm sure the chairman would probably, we could get into a very long discussion here about Bears Ears, particularly I wasn't for expanding oil and gas leasing into Bears Ears. It's a beautiful protected area. I personally think that the outdoor economy is a juggernaut. I don't want offshore drilling off the coast of Washington. Why? I got a marine sanctuary. Why in God's name? I have a Cascadia fault line. I mean, I could have devastation to an economy that's paying dividends. Why would I want to do that? So I'm just saying, one of the things that would be helpful to hear from you is that you believe in prioritizing on federal land the leases that are already there, as opposed to now going and saying, okay, let's get a big map and open up all federal land to new leasing. Because your point about efficiency, yeah, the most efficient thing is go after what you already have.
Well, I'm going to have to, before I can make an affirmative statement that I agree with you, I'd have to understand, because what I've seen in my time as governor is not that we have existing, but we're actually restricting legal access for development or timber or oil and gas or whatever on public lands today.
Okay.
By illegally not holding the leases that should have been held. So I'm not even.
Okay, we'll come. My time is up, and I'm now in the red, so I'm going to get cut off here. So, but we will submit something for you and submit something for the record on that. I'm sure I'll submit something on fire and CLT, and maybe you and I can have a discussion about what I think really would help us move forward on some of those issues. But I also, just for the record, on tribal sovereignty, you believe in tribal sovereignty, you believe in tribal consultation, which doesn't mean you just pick up the phone and have one conversation. Tribal consultation means you actually, when the federal government says, hey, so much money needs to go to tribes, that you actually figure out the plan for that to happen.
Well, tribal consultation to me as governor of North Dakota has meant actually spending time and going to the tribes, listening, sometimes listening for hours to really understand what the issues are, and then in getting to people ahead of time, and then working on things that are important. We achieved MOUs on law enforcement. I mean, some of the scarcest and most devastating law enforcement in this country right now is the lack of BIA agents on federal land. I mean, some of the tribal reservations have become harbors for criminal organizations because they know that we don't have enough resource there, and then our local county sheriffs, the state police, in many cases didn't have jurisdiction. That's just one. Healthcare is another. I mean,
yep, thank you. I'm sorry, the chairman's going to cut me off. But thank you so much for that answer. I appreciate it. That is the kind of stewardship we need with our partnership between us and Indian country. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Senator Murkowski now.
Governor Burgum, thanks for doing the job, man. We appreciate it. We both come from oil and gas producing states. One of my top priorities has been to use federal state revenue sharing on oil and gas lands to help rebuild Louisiana's coastline. During the time of this hearing, we will have lost several football fields worth of Louisiana coastline, which of course makes us more vulnerable to a hurricane hitting our coast. And last Congress, I'm pleased to say that the RISE Act, which did that, passed by voice vote out of this committee. So I'm hoping we do that again. Can you briefly speak to the importance of revenue sharing to North Dakota, knowing that on federal lands in North Dakota, there's revenue that comes back to help mitigate whatever negative impact that drilling may have?
well, yes, absolutely. And the federal revenue goes two ways. I mean, at least we've got it coming back, a portion of it back to the state, but then a portion of it goes back to the federal Treasury. And the federal Treasury, as we know, we've talked earlier about the debt that we have, responsible, sustainable, smart development, whether it's onshore or offshore, is of great benefit to conservation, in your case, coastline, but it also can help pay for other things. In our state, the revenues that are coming in are helping pay for education, healthcare, roads. It touches every...
If you will, it's kind of a middle class, if you will, and lower economic class benefit program, because those things are touching services directly, aside from the jobs being created, directly impacting the quality of their life.
Absolutely, and then when done effectively and appropriately, it also lowers the burden of sales tax and property tax and income tax on those same
So let me ask-
hardworking individuals.
It's music to my ears. I will say, when I speak to the folks that actually do these big developments, one fellow said, it used to be when they had a lease sale, I could plan a fishing trip with my son at the same time because it was so regular. It was going to be on this day at this time, happened to be in New Orleans, so they had a great meal. On to say that now there's been dilatory practices that have been instituted, not for the sake of anything other than dilatory and to increase the cost of development and to hopefully thwart that development. Can I get a commitment from you, as much as you can possibly do it, that when we have lease sales now, they will be as they are scheduled to have lease sales, and so the people making these decisions will have certainty as to them?
As someone who was participating in a lawsuit suing the federal government to try to get them to hold the lease sales when they were supposed to be held by law, you can count that as head of Interior, we will be following the law when it comes to lease sale time.
And I think the operative statement is you'll be following the law, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Now, on that, we know that on some federal lands, from before modern environmental standards, there are abandoned oil and gas wells, and those tend to leak methane, for example. I'm very interested in working on a bipartisan basis, bicameral basis, of how we can actually have a federal program which sustainably is paying to cap these abandoned oil and gas wells. And Louisiana has about 1,500 of them. Any thoughts about that? Because I'm sure in North Dakota that you had to address this issue too.
Well, in North Dakota, we took part of the revenues that were coming into the state from the oil and gas tax revenues, and we created a abandoned well reclamation fund, and that's been replenished, and then that goes back in to do that. But we've also made sure that the private sector is doing their share.
Now, let me ask, because one thing I hear from the private sector is the issue of liability protection. Will they be sued the bejesus out of if something goes bad about this remediation of the abandoned oil and gas well? And I ask this, I don't know the answer to it. We're trying to explore that. There is the abandoned abandoned mine provisions that we're looking at. How did y'all manage that in North Dakota?
Well, we always were looking for incentives to make sure that the private sector was willing to participate as opposed to afraid to participate. And you're describing this thing where if you get unlimited liability, then they want to run the other way and lawyer up and do that, as opposed to, hey, if you got the appropriate bond levels that are economic, they pay those up front. We exhaust those. If they've got other payments that they need to do, we've just been able to work collaboratively in a way to make sure that the private sector is doing their share when we're doing this. And part of that, their shares, because we're taking if they weren't investing in creating the well, putting in the people, doing the development, taking the risk on the front end, we wouldn't have the revenue to split up on the back end.
So we're going to look at what y'all did in North Dakota as we draft our legislation. One more thing, knowing that you'll be in charge of this, as I gather, this kind of how do we do energy sort of thing. One thing that I've been concerned about is that countries like China do not enforce international standards on controlling pollution. That lowers their cost of manufacturing as much as 20%, incentivizing manufacturers to leave our country and move there. But then we get the loss of the jobs, but also all the air pollution that then blows over to our West Coast. I think I read 20% of the SOx in California is related to emissions from China. Now, one thing I've been proposing, Senator Graham as my co-sponsor, is a foreign pollution fee that would put a fee on certain products from a country like China roughly equal to their avoided cost of not complying with environmental regulations. As the president speaks about tariffs, this would be a tariff that would be thoroughly defensible as we address something the economists call externalities. I slept in a Holiday Inn last night, I know that word. So I go through that knowing that you and your position will be making sure that our industry is competitive in terms of controlling our emissions in accordance with the law, which then gives us that advantage relative to those competitors arbitraging those rules. Any quick comment on that? Because the chair is being generous and allowing me out a little extra time.
Well, I think you're spot on to recognize President Trump, who has a willingness to use tariffs. His principle is reciprocity. If you have access to our markets, and we don't have access to yours, or if you're using unfair practices, if you're dumping in here, in this case, if they're not doing reclamation, they're using child labor, they're doing all the things that lower their cost, that's exactly the kind of place that he has publicly spoken about, that he would want to have reciprocity with tariffs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Governor, for being here. Appreciate this. It's always good to have other governors in the room, or former governors, I guess, at this point. I got 3 questions, so I'm going to be pretty quick in the questions, and I try to be unfailingly polite, but if I override you, it's just because I want to get to all 3 questions. Obviously, I worked on methane regulations back when I was governor. We were the first state or province anywhere in the world to actually regulate methane, but we did it by working with the industry. They came and helped create the regulations that they were going to guide them. Senator Cassidy was just talking about abandoned wells. It's all part of that same problem. As Secretary of the Interior, how do you think you can use your authority to advance rules that boost innovation in the energy sector to, let's reduce methane is one thing, but I'll broaden the question and say, and getting to better, cleaner energy that's at the same time reliable and at a low cost?
Well, I should say, Mayor, Governor, Senator, I love this question because the focus on innovation, we've seen in North Dakota, again, the federal regulation comes in, it's proposed, it goes through the rule changing, it takes years to finally get it finalized, then it gets finalized, and then all of a sudden you got a federal employee in a white pickup with a clipboard, driving around that the taxpayers are paying for, trying to find out if we've got an emission here, emission there. Meanwhile, if that's 6 to 8 years from the beginning of a problem to when the rule gets finalized and is actually enforced, we've gone through like 4 or 5 cycles of Moore's.
Get to the innovation.
Yeah, we've gone through 4 or 5 cycles of Moore's Law, and then someone's got a solution to say we can do methane capture at the well, we can do it cheaply, we can do it this. They implement it, they can capture it, they can turn it into electricity, they can, do power generation for a data center on site and on a well site. I mean, the amount of innovation that is occurring right now in the energy industry is unbelievable. It's as exciting as anything in tech that's going on. And so that's why I say innovation over regulation. We can solve these problems cheaper, faster, and quicker than we can through expensive and outdated regulations.
Yeah, we've never needed more innovation in a short time than we need in energy right now. As the energies are, on the other side, there have been a lot of reports about tariffs on critical minerals that possibly on everything. They're from all different, a lot of people are saying a lot of different things. So in terms of imposing tariffs without having a clear strategy on how we're going to secure the supply chains for these critical minerals essential to our defense, to our aerospace industry, go down the list, what's your plan to collaborate with our allies to make sure that we can ensure a reliable supply chain on these critical minerals?
Well, I think the key there is allies, because we need to be, we have to have a security network of people that are truly our allies, and we have to be able to buy and sell from each other around these critical minerals. But right now, we've been, over the last 20 years, we were, as a nation, one of the great mining economies in the world 20 years ago. It's become a dirty word. You can hardly find a kid in college that wants to go into geology or geologic or
Don't
mining.
you're hurting me.
Well, you were there.
I am a geologist.
Yes, you are.
Or I was.
But you understand in your profession how that has shifted in your lifetime, and we've got to bring it back, because this is critical to our nation's future. And again, when we can do it here with innovation, better, cleaner, and safer than the world, we're actually helping the world environment when we do it in the United States.
We can set those standards, and I agree completely that we are the ones who are going to create a better way to extract minerals with less pollution and less risk. Last question. Obviously, public land is a key part of Colorado, just like they are of North Dakota. I commend you. I think what you did as a governor, you took a lot of what we did and did it better. It's very frustrating, but we governors like to give credit where credit is due. We have certain places in Colorado, and we discussed this when you were in my office last week, and I appreciate you taking the time with all that you've got going on to come and spend an hour with us. We have some places where local governments, the local community, the ranchers have kind of joined arms side by side to protect lands. We have one piece of land there that's called the Thompson Divide. And it's been somewhat controversial. There's one mining or oil company that felt that there was potential there. I took a pretty deep look at the seismic and couldn't see much source there, much potential, but it's been controversial. I wanted to make sure, A, to extend the invitation that you come to Colorado, which I'm sure everyone up here is, even if they haven't said it, they look forward to it. But to come and walk that landscape with some of the local ranchers and farmers there, so you can get a sense that this isn't a partisan issue. This is a piece of land that pretty much everyone in the community has decided needs to be protected.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I would look forward to it, Senator.
Great, thank you.
Today. I'm going to turn the time over now to our ranking member, Senator Martin Heinrich from New Mexico.
Thank you, Chairman. And Governor Burgum, welcome to the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. We had a great conversation last week. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your answers to the questions today. And I too want to begin by acknowledging the horrific wildfires in California over the last couple of weeks. And having spoken to many of my members on the dais, I know you're going to get some questions about that, and in particular about firefighters and how we make sure that they are supported. The Department of Interior has responsibility for an incredibly broad array of issues, from conserving the places that Americans love to spend time with their families, to protecting and recovering our most iconic wildlife species, to delivering water to cities and farms across the West, and fulfilling our nation's trust responsibilities to tribal nations. Pretty much any job that involves responsibilities that range from elementary school students and healthcare to bison is a pretty big job. Public lands are, they're where we go to camp and hike and hunt and fish and spend time with our families. They're where our veterans go to seek the peace and solitude that their service to our country could not always provide. And while there are some who argued that the very existence of public lands, places like Yosemite or the Bitterroot National Forest, are unconstitutional, but most Americans know that the idea of lands that belong to everyone, no matter where they live or who their parents are or how thick or thin their wallet is one of the most democratic ideas from our nation. I hope you'll join me in keeping public lands in public hands. And the Interior Department is also the leader in meeting our nation's trust responsibility to tribal nations and upholding the treaty commitments that we as a nation made to tribes and their members. As a nation, as we discussed in my office, we routinely fall short of meeting those commitments. We can and we must do better. As the relentless pace of climate change brings bigger floods, hotter summers, higher winds, as we've seen in California, and diminished snowpack, which we are experiencing in New Mexico, it's also driving the long-term aridification of the western United States. Over the next 50 years, it's expected that New Mexico will have 25% less water than we have had historically. And we're not alone in that. The Colorado River, which provides drinking water for 40 million people, irrigates billions of dollars worth of crops, provides essential habitat for fish and wildlife, and will likely never return to those early 20th century flows that we used to be able to expect. Through the Bureau of Reclamation, the Department of the Interior must play an active role in helping the West transition to that new water reality. And as you know, the Interior Department is also an energy department. As we make the transition to a cleaner energy economy, the land and water managed by the department will play an indispensable role in producing the energy that we need, as well as facilitating the ability to move that energy around the country. From geothermal and hydrogen to solar and wind, the department's work is at the center of our energy future. Governor, I very much look forward to hearing your plans on all of these topics and more, and I think we'll have some very active questions from all of our members today.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, welcome. How are you?
I'm great.
Mr. Secretary, you familiar with the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge in Georgia?
I'm not familiar, no.
I'd love to get you down to visit. Can you do that?
I would love to get to Georgia.
We would love to welcome you to visit the Okefenokee. It is one of our state's great treasures, one of the most beautiful, biodiverse wildlife refuges in North America, the largest blackwater swamp of its kind in North America. There is an effort with bipartisan support that the previous administration supported to secure UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Okefenokee. This has strong bipartisan support among local officials, state officials in Georgia, former Governor Sonny Perdue, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones among them. Will you continue to support our efforts to secure UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Okefenokee, which is now in your purview as part of a national wildlife refuge system?
Well, I'm certainly interested in learning more about it. I know that that's a lengthy process and is of achieving that. So I would love to understand all the implications of supporting it, if there's budget implications for Interior. So, but I'm certainly happy to take a look at it.
Well, we need your support. We need to get you down there as well to spend some time at the refuge. I know there's been some public discussion about sale of public lands. Can you give an unequivocal guarantee that you will not pursue any sale of any part of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Secretary, I wrote you a letter on April 10th about an apparent effort by DOGE to close the U.S. Geological Survey office in Norcross, Georgia. This is the Water Science Center in Norcross. Plays a critical role in ensuring water quality for folks in Metro Atlanta. Did you receive that letter?
I'm certain that our team did.
I have not received a response. It's been about 6 weeks. Any reason for that?
No specific reason other than how incredibly short-staffed we are as we're trying to ramp up.
Can you get back more promptly in the future?
As we just said earlier, when we have 0 of our 16 Senate confirmed leaders on board. First one is coming on the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and so as we get the leadership team in place, I'm sure our operations will speed up.
We need timely responses to those kinds of inquiries, Mr. Secretary. I mean, the staff at this office test water quality to ensure that Georgians don't drink contaminated water. Senator Warnock and I have asked you not to close this office. No justification for such closure was offered. There's significant public concern in Georgia about the potential impact on water quality. Am I correct that you've abandoned those plans or overruled the DOGE effort to close that office in Norcross?
I'm not familiar with the when you're saying closure. I know that there was an effort to take a look at all the real estate we had, particularly the fact that we had virtually every employee in Interior was working remotely, and yet we were paying hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate bills. And so I think it was reasonable that we took a look to say, do we need the real estate? But I'm not sure when you're saying closing the office, if you're talking about the positions or about the office lease, because I know some office leases were being considered removed and some have been.
Yeah, so DOGE expressed its intent to close the U.S. Geological Survey Water Science Center in Norcross, Georgia. You've heard from me and Senator Warnock our opposition. As I mentioned, there's tremendous public concern. Are you still planning to close that office? Well,
we'll certainly take this particular request under consultation, and our team will be in discussion with you and your team about that.
Okay, well, with respect, Mr. Secretary, this is an issue that I raised about a month and a half ago with you.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so when can I expect a response?
Soon.
Okay. Let me raise with you the ongoing bipartisan effort to establish Georgia's first ever national park. This is the Ocmulgee National Park and Preserve Initiative. Congressman Austin Scott, Republican in the House, and I are leading a bipartisan bicameral group of the Georgia delegation in order to establish this national park and preserve. For the first time, made major progress in the U.S. Senate last Congress on this effort. Overwhelming local support in the Macon area for getting this done. We've been grateful for the department's past support, providing technical assistance to help us move that forward. Will you continue to provide that support?
We're happy to engage with you and take a look at this proposal and this project.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, and my time has expired. I know you're getting up to speed and staffing up. Would appreciate more intensity of engagement on some of these Georgia concerns and look forward to sitting down with you and welcoming you to the state to work with you in Georgia's interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
Mr. Secretary, as you know, we have 63 crown jewels in our national park system. It's when people say, I want to visit every national park, they're normally talking about those crown jewels. But there's 370 other national park sites in the system. And those include in Oregon places like the Oregon Caves, the John Day Fossil Beds, the Lewis and Clark National Historic Park, places of significance. Certainly the people of Oregon, but the people of the nation. You have proposed slashing $900 million from the national park system by offloading some of those 370 national park sites, and that are not part of the crown jewels. And you calculated you could save this $900 million with lower maintenance because there'd be fewer sites. Do you have the list of sites that you plan to offload for us?
I do not. This is a proposed idea, and the whole 900 is not related specifically, but thank you for clarifying for everyone that this does not touch any of, as you've described, the crown jewel parks. But certainly in places like North Dakota with Knife River Indian Villages, we've got places that were designated as federal locations that have almost no visitors. They're cost centers. We have to staff them. We have to maintain them. And I know as a governor that...
So are you going to send us a list of the proposed sites?
This is a proposal for the 2026 budget, so we'll be working through, and I think this is going to be a case-by-case, state-by-state to see where they're. But yes, we will send you it when we have the plan.
I'll try to keep moving quickly because of the limited time, but certainly most of these, there are a small number that were not established through law, but almost all of the 370 were established by law. Is it your understanding that we would have to change the law in order for you to be able to put these sites up for transfer?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that because we were very concerned that this would be a form of an executive action and then we'd all go to court and fight it out because the law established them, and we believe that the law has to be changed in order to send them off. And if you have some in your home state that you're comfortable sending off, that you could request the governors to say what do they want to do. But I have a feeling the governor of Oregon would say these sites, these 3 sites in Oregon, and others are of great value to our national system for all Americans. I want to turn to the challenge we're getting of getting answers from your department. We've had repeated requests dating back to January 23rd about funding, whether you want to use the term frozen or the term impounded or delayed, and we haven't gotten answers. How do we get answers from your staff?
Well, let's start with any specific ones you may not have. I mean, we are following the executive orders, the secretarial orders to review. There was an enormous amount of money that went out the door between November 6th and January 20th. I think everyone would say that it would be responsible for us to make sure that those were going to the recipients that it was intended.
Well, just getting any kind of an answer would at least have us know that your team is actually paying attention to our requests for information. Can I call you when we can't get information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Our international partners are fighting poaching and trafficking of elephants and rhinos, haven't been able to access their legally obligated funds since January 20th. Are these funds blocked? Are they delayed? Are they frozen? That's an example. You may not have the answer, but it's affecting studies that have been in motion, that many Americans passionately support our effort to be part of the international effort for these amazing animals.
And was there, I'm sorry, the question was?
Yes, the question is, if you do know the answer, you can tell me now, but otherwise, can you commit to getting us an answer?
Yeah, we can commit to getting you an answer.
Thank you. The law requires that we get a list for the Great American Outdoors Act and the Land and Water Conservation Fund projects by April 29th. Obviously, we're past that. We have not gotten that list. Can you assure us we'll get it shortly?
Yes, we'll be working on that.
Working on it, like, can we get it within the next couple weeks?
We've got lots of irons in the fire in terms of right now as we're trying to build up staff, but yes, we'll be working on it.
Well, let me just note that the number of days left in fiscal year 25 are evaporating. So less and less time to actually have the funding that was passed by law transmitted in an effective way. We hope that when we see those lists, that the funds will get out by the end of the fiscal year and that they will be fairly distributed across the country. What many are concerned about is we will see funding from the Great American Outdoors Act turn into a political tool. Can you commit that that will not happen?
We will follow the law related to the Great American Outdoor Act.
Well, it is not an answer because the law gives you some flexibility. I'm asking that this not become a fund to reward blue or red house districts in a discriminatory fashion.
I'm smiling because that practice was so widely used by the prior administration. It's one of the things we're reviewing, but certainly we will be trying to allocate the dollars based on the merit and based on following the law within.
Actually, I think your statement is very inaccurate about the previous administration, but we'll leave it to others to determine that situation. Because my time's evaporated, we'll turn to our next person.
Thank you. Senator Hoeven.
I just want to say on the last thing, grants went up by over 100% in the last part of the last administration. If we cut them by 50%, we would be back to where the level of spending we were in 2001 at the beginning of the Biden administration. And so the idea that taking a look at any cut is some dangerous, destabilizing thing is just not true. This thing operated, all these agencies operated with far less levels of spending for decades and decades compared to where they've been at the last few years.
Madam Chair, let me just point out that is not a point that I made, so I don't appreciate you trying to pretend that I did.
Let's go to Senator Hoeven, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. Appreciate your service. Have you ever started?
Thank you very much, Chairman Murkowski. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to start by touching briefly on Hurricane Ridge. That is a place, as you know, is very special to people in my home state of Washington, and visitors come to it from all over the world. I know that you visited Olympic National Park last week, and you saw how scenic it was and a hint of how brutal the weather can be. It's called Hurricane Ridge for a reason. The Hurricane Ridge Day Lodge burned down in a tragic fire 2 years ago, and Congress delivered the emergency funding necessary to rebuild it last year. In the execution report that you delivered to the committee in February, the disaster funding spend plan, you included the money for the Olympic National Park, I understand is for Hurricane Ridge. Do you have any updates for us on the next steps for that project?
No, but I did have an opportunity with the park superintendent and some of the lead people to actually get to Hurricane Ridge, and thankfully there was not 70-mile-an-hour winds. It was beautiful, sunny, calm, gorgeous, but I got to see the site where the fire had happened and was able to meet with them regarding the plans that they have, and it looks like a great project.
Good. And can you just keep my staff and me updated on that project as it moves forward? It's really important to all of us.
Okay, thank you.
As you saw, Washington State is home to a number of pristine public lands. People travel from all over the world to experience my state and Oregon. Secretary Burgum, our public lands aren't for sale. Protecting our wilderness, living up to our tribal obligations, keeping our communities safe, it's just not negotiable. And it's actually a core reason that your department does exist and have been these have been places with strong bipartisan support. So I'm really concerned that one of the first things you did was make deep, painful cuts at our parks and start talking about our public lands kind of like they're a piggy bank. I do not want to tell future generations that see that river of sludge used to be clear, used to have salmon, or see that charred mountainside used to be a forest with campgrounds and trails, or that smokestack used to be a national park. I worry because it feels to me like your vision could lead to that with your budget cuts and mass firings and reorganization. And I'm deeply concerned about the proposed cuts to programs and funding that our tribes rely on, the mass firing of park rangers. They're the people who help our visitors. They clear the trails, they clean the bathrooms, they respond to emergencies, and it just, as I watch this and hear from folks and see what's happening, on top of getting some bedrock environmental protections, I just don't see how your department can execute the law without staff in place. So just let me ask you, in your short tenure, you have overseen significant staffing reductions, over 10%, and reorganization efforts across the Department of Interior with, I understand, more firings to come. The National Park Service has lost 18% of its staff. You managed to actually fire the only plumber at Mount Rainier National Park. There's just nothing efficient about that kind of management. You've also decided that what few staff remain at our national parks will focus solely on visitor services. That really abandons the conservation mission, which no doubt will lead to the degradation of our natural resources and our parks. Actually, on May 8th, 5 former NPS directors, Republican and Democratic administration alike, raised really grave concerns about these decisions. And they wrote that the National Park Service's founding statute requires conservation at our parks, so they will, quote, be unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. You know, we need trail guides and biologists. We need EMTs and geologists. We need snowplow drivers, and we need historians. Mr. Secretary, do you acknowledge that you do have a statutory obligation to conserve our national parks? And that's really a simple yes or no.
Yes.
Well, it just feels to me watching this that you are abandoning that obligation with the staffing cuts, and your job is to carry out the laws that Congress has passed, not as you wish were written. So let me ask you, how many people do you plan to fire from the National Park Service?
Let me respond by saying, I'm going to repeat myself, that there's an opportunity to have more people working in our parks in all the positions that you've described, Senator, and have less people working for the National Park Service. We just have to accept that this math, that if you've got a situation where slightly less than 50% of the people actually work in a park, that everything you said, I can increase the number of people in the park, but still decrease the number of people on payroll at the National Park Service because we're eliminating overhead, back office, IT, and HR roles. And so I can agree with everything that you're saying, but then to have a mischaracterization that if we cut anybody, that somehow I'm cutting into the conservation mission.
It's huge cuts, and the people you're talking about are actually the support staff. And when you cut support staff, that's not efficient. You know, how does someone drive a snowplow if you don't have a staffer that makes sure that the government gets the best deal to buy that snowplow? I mean, there's many, many detailed people that you're talking about that actually make sure that the spending is efficient, that the people are efficient, that we all know how important staff is. I mean, you can't survive without that. Those are the people that you're letting go. We can't be efficient if they are not there.
Well, are you suggesting that the National Park Service today is operating at peak efficiency and that there isn't any changes that I could make?
I would suggest that I welcome any suggestions to us about how to be efficient, but just mass across the board cuts and firing is really going to not increase efficiency at our parks, and that I think we all should be very concerned about.
But if the goal is for us to have more people working in the parks, you're comfortable if I can get to a spot where we have more people working in the parks?
You show me what employees you are leaving behind that don't support someone that makes sure that they have the equipment that they need, that is up to date, it's running, those kinds of things. You can't just cut those people and expect people to be out in the national parks without somebody who's making sure that their equipment is safe, that their hours are maintained, all the things that it takes to run a place. Our national parks are huge. They take a lot of people to run.
A state is huge. I've run in DOT. I understand the role of support personnel across Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Rec, DOT. All of these aspects of a national park are part of running a state. And I'm confident that with our team that we can achieve your objectives and still have a reduction.
One thing I am really concerned about, and everybody should be, is our national wildland firefighting efforts. And countless staff who provide the necessary support there. For example, firefighters put their lives at risk. Without support they need in many different roles, it just gets more dangerous. So those are the kinds of people that I am extremely concerned about, that without thought or really smart moves, that we're going to be putting our parks at risk.
Well, agree on the wildland firefighters. That's why Secretary Rollins and I yesterday held a joint event reaffirming our commitment to work together between the Forest Service and Interior, and our commitment to have full staffing for wildland firefighters this summer. And we're close to approaching that goal. And so we're fully committed. And
Okay, I appreciate it. Just one really quick question regarding our tribes. You have a role in fulfilling the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities to our tribes. I see numerous cuts across the budget that defends tribal police, putting together the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I just wanted to ask you, how many tribes have you personally consulted with on your budget request?
I've been meeting with tribes every week since I've been here. I've got a deep understanding of our challenges and shortage in law enforcement.
There's 574 tribes. Which ones have you met with? Have you consulted or met with?
I can happy to provide you a list, but I just recently had the Interior Secretary Tribal Advisory Committee. We had 24 representatives from tribes from across the country actually meeting in my office just a couple of weeks ago. Law enforcement was a key part of that. We had an opportunity to meet with the family of Emily Pike. I brought Kash Patel over. Of course, it's not just the BIA, it's also the FBI. When these cases get escalated, we have over 6,000.
I would just remind all of us that Kash Patel is cutting $500 million from his budget on this. So,
and he's providing 60 people to Indian country right now to help with the 6,000 unsolved cases on the missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a priority for us.
All of us. And I just want to say that my tribes in Washington State are deeply concerned. They're telling us that these layoffs will eliminate natural resource management, basic social services, and they are horrified. So I hope that in your list that you will provide me that I see some of their names.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray. We'll turn to Senator Rounds. And Mr. Secretary, just so you know, our votes have started, so you're going to.
Just in time. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, I appreciate our conversations, your responsiveness. I want to bring up what is in the skinny budget and just quote from it real quick. The National Park Service responsibilities include a large number of sites that are not quote-unquote national parks in the traditionally understood sense, many of which receive small numbers of mostly local visitors and are better categorized and managed as state-level parks. I want to strike a note of caution with that sort of approach. I love our Big P national parks. Behind me is a picture of a non-Big P national park. It is a national preserve. It is the Valles Caldera National Preserve. We've been talking in New Mexico for 100 years about this being a national park, and we finally settled on the approach of a preserve, in part because we wanted the natural resource management of a national park with the ability to also have world-class hunting and fishing and the visitors that come with all of those things. So I would just urge you to look as you develop this list, and many of these units have been created in statute, many of them that are not necessarily a Big P National Park are incredibly important parts of our national park system, our history, and our culture, and I just hope you will approach that with caution.
Absolutely. And with consultation. So, but and thanks for bringing the beautiful photo behind you.
Yeah, if you get a chance to visit, I highly recommend it, and bring your fly rod.
Is that you in the photo?
Actually, it is. Yep.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
Yeah.
Tell by the angle of the wrist.
Have you discussed with any particular states this approach yet, or is it still in the sort of formation
This
stage?
is completely in the idea formation stage.
Okay. BIE school construction costs. I'm not going to question your effectiveness at finding ways to reduce overhead and push forward on the ground deployment for better resource management. But this particular account, and I was talking to the chair about this on the way over, really concerns me. The president's budget calls for a 79% or $187 million reduction in the BIA school construction account. This is a place where we have a $4 billion construction backlog. It's not overhead. I mean, this is money to actually build schools. It's not money to pay administrators. And so you and I have talked about the incredibly poor condition of some of these BIE schools. How are you going to move the needle on BIE school construction with this budget line item?
It's interesting that we've got in BIE about 125,000 kids, which is about exactly what we had in North Dakota in our K-12 system. But of course, these are spread across the nation. Not every state has got a BIE school. And we've got a complicated situation that some places you've got a BIE school next to a tribal school, next to a public school. That's a scenario I've seen. And I think that part of this is we've got to take a look at the sort of the system-wide. In terms of dollars in states like my own state of North Dakota, we put more dollars into BIE than we do into tribal and into public, and yet the outcomes are the worst. So there's not I'm not, when I'm education hat, I'm not seeing a correlation. I think the school construction and deferred maintenance, I mean, that's an issue across parks, across refuges. I mean, it's across all of government, federal government, we got a deferred maintenance issue. So the construction thing I just set aside, but I think, where I would start my focus on BIE is, how do we improve outcomes for those kids? And then are there opportunities for us from a school construction standpoint to look for any opportunities with tribes or with public schools to not, to, if we fix the problems, but can we do it? I mean, I know there's a case in our state where they're less than a mile apart.
I think we can both agree we've got to do better for these kids.
Yes.
The president's budget proposes a almost $200 million cut to the Bureau of Land Management Conservation Programs. In your confirmation hearing, you told me that you would not make any wholesale changes to monument designations in New Mexico without first meeting with local elected leaders and citizen groups in the state. Do I still have your commitment on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Appreciate that.
I think you do. I think you do know there have been concerns. People have come to me about the buffer zone related to that and how it infringes on tribal allottee rights. So we're listening to all sides of this thing, but we'll keep in close consultation.
That I think you're talking about a particular mineral withdrawal, and my question was related directly to the monuments.
Yes,
which is a separate issue. But
yes.
I'll be happy to engage with you on both.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Burgum, I am...
Secretary, we will begin with a round of questions, 5 minutes apiece, and recognizing members in the order within which they have arrived. I want to start, Mr. Secretary, just where you left off there, which is the extension of an offer to work with members on this committee. I was reminded last week when we had Administrator Zeldin here that many of us have the bat line. We can call the administrator, we can call the secretary, and I have appreciated that engagement. But I think we also recognize that our teams need to be able to have this level of direct communication as well. And so in the effort to make sure that we are following the commitment of transparency, partnership, and responsiveness, I'd like just your commitment on behalf of your staff that we are able to set up at least quarterly meetings with your senior team, our senior approps folks here, to just go through many of the nits and recognizing that quite often we're going to need more than just that, but just this regular communication, particularly at a time when there is so much that is going on right now with a reprogramming, with restructuring, for us to better able to help you. We just need that kind of commitment. So it's worth a minute of my time at the top here to just ask for that public commitment to working with all of us here.
You have that commitment, and again, for those of you that are part of the confirmation process, thank you for continuing to move leaders forward. We're excited about having Kate McGregor start on the Tuesday after Memorial Day. This will be the first of 16 Senate-nominated positions joining Interior, and as the team we got some great candidates. As we get those onboarded, we're going to make sure to be working closely with all of you.
Appreciate that, and we look forward to that. I mentioned how refreshing it is to have an administration that recognizes the extraordinary potential that we have in Alaska, viewing our resource assets as an asset rather than a liability that needs to be protected against. I've mentioned the executive order unleashing Alaska's extraordinary resource potential. You also had a corresponding secretary's order. I'm hoping that you can share with me an update on the plans to meet implementation goals of this EO and what Alaskans can expect to see in the works for this summer season. And I've mentioned in my opening statements my concern that as we're seeing this significant transition within the department and workforce reduction initiatives, that we're not going to see any of this that happens back here undercutting both the president's and your stated policy goals as they relate to Alaska here.
Well, I think the place I'd like to start, which would be helpful, I think, for all the members of this committee, is to understand that when I came on board, one of the first things that I wanted to understand as an executive was, how many people worked in each bureau and what roles they had and where they were located. Of course, we had a remote working in place when I entered the building after my confirmation. A building here, that headquarters that could hold as many as 3,500 people. There was nobody there. There was the appointees that had come on. There was a custodial staff. And I said, kind of, where is everybody? Well, we got a back to work order that's, coming up. The back to work order occurred later in February, and then we started to have some people trickle into the building. We still have a building that maybe is 1/3 full. I said, well, I thought I'll just go to the systems and find out. Turns out there was no way for me to even send an email to the 65,000 team members across all the bureaus. There wasn't a way to find out how many people worked in each of these bureau agencies. The IT systems are so incredibly outdated. And so then I said, well, let's just start with parks, because that's obviously important to everybody. How many people work in the parks, and how many are permanent, how many are permanent temporary, and how many are summer help? Just trying to find that out was difficult. And then we got a number, about 26,500 people work in the park system. And my next question was, well, how many of them actually physically work in a park? And that answer took almost 8 weeks, because we had to have a group of people pull from all these heterogeneous systems information, because we had a home address where maybe their payroll check is being sent. We didn't, in many cases, even have duty stations for where the people reported to. And then when the number came back, the first number came back was, because I know everyone's just like hair on fire, like, oh, if we cut anybody, we're not going to be able to keep the parks open. The first number got slightly less than 50% of the permanent employees actually work in a park. They're working at a regional headquarters, they're working in some other location, they're working here in headquarters. And so then it was like, well, how many of them work by different functions? Because we always talk about park rangers and wildfire fires, which we had put as a protected class on all of the orders when I got there, which is don't get rid of any wildland firefighters, don't get rid of any law enforcement. We don't want any of that. So then it comes back, and that of the 65,000 people in Interior, 2,000 of them are listed as being in HR. I didn't hear anybody mention, please protect the HR positions. We got several thousand people working in IT, and I don't know what they do. I'm trying to find out, but I know we've got gobs and gobs of contractors chewing up the budget, and I think that people in IT are hiring contractors to do their work. And so my thesis right up front is for all the mischaracterization and hyperbole, that somehow taking a hard look at how we actually operate an agency of this scope and scale, that we can't have a substantial amount of savings, both in personnel cost and in dollars, and then actually end up with what all of us want, what all of you want, and what I want. I want more people in the parks. Whether they're driving a snowplow in the wintertime, or whether they're working with his interpreter in the summertime, or whether we're doing trail work, if they're firefighting, I want more of that. I want less overhead, because when I talk to these park superintendents and I said, how can I make your life more productive? It's not just about, oh, I need more people. Some of these parks, like Yellowstone, have got more people working this summer than they've ever had in the history of the park. Or certainly more than they've had. So so we're up from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And then, but I'm saying, what can I do to help your life be more productive? And they say, get rid of the red tape above me. And so that's one of the things we're working on, and I think so we're listening to the people that are actually on the job doing the operations, and it's just common sense. So I think we can accomplish the goals that were raised by Senator Merkley and others, which is we can get more people actually doing the work and have the savings. Then if I can produce the savings, if I can reinvest those, then into the things that people matter, deferred maintenance.
So I let you go 2 minutes over my time, and I don't want to set that as the standard for the rest of my colleagues, because I understand we have a vote here, I think at 11:30, and I want folks to be able to have multiple rounds. I do think it was kind of important to just lay set the table here for what we're seeing. So I appreciate that. I'm now going to turn to Senator.
Thank you very much. My time's expired. Senator Heinrich.
Thank you. Welcome, Secretary. I want to continue on this same vein, and when will we know which lands are being considered for land sales? And also, I want to ask you if you have, well, let's just start with that so that we can have a public process here, so that the public can understand really what's at stake, and so we can get beyond the current dynamic of what people are imagining, but actually understanding what lands you're talking about in this process.
Yes, thank you, Ranking Member. On the right now, we're at a proposal stage, and so we've taken a look, as I've just described, at a macro level. We've tried to take a look and say we have taken a look. How many acres do we have that might be something that could be of high value for an alternative use, say like housing, that has low value for recreation, mineral resources, et cetera, and those typically are things that are directly adjacent to existing and fast-growing population centers. So that was our first target. And of course, those are occurring most likely in the states that I've described, the 3 states that have the highest percentage of federal land, or the 4, Idaho, Alaska, Utah, and Nevada, have got the highest percentage of federal land, and are also have got fast-growing communities that are bumping up against low-value federal land.
I think to make sure that we're dealing with lands that are, as you describe, one of the most important things will be to have a transparent and public process. Will you hold public meetings before offering those potential lands up for sale?
Yeah, absolutely, and I want to reassure members here and the public that there's, there won't be an acre of any of our 63 national parks that are considered up for sale. I mean, this is not about our most sacred and beautiful places. This is often about, like I said, barren land next to highways with existing billboards that have no recreational value, but would do represent a constraint. In some cases, cities are leapfrogging their infrastructure beyond the federal land, creating additional infrastructure costs for those cities. And of course, when we can do infill, that helps, creates a great revenue opportunity for us to help, whether it's deferred maintenance, new recreational opportunities, or reducing the deficit, but also helps those cities operate more efficiently.
You talked about the Southern Nevada legislation, but there's actually a federal program that's available to every single state for the BLM to utilize, and that's the Federal Land Transaction Facilitation Act. The funds that get generated from public lands that get sold under that legislation go to recreation, they go to access, they go to conservation. We're currently developing some housing in New Mexico using that framework. Is that a framework that you have looked at for this process?
I certainly want to look at all the models that we have today that are already working and learn from them to as we go forward to make sure that we're using the best practices that we've identified.
Obviously, the advantage of FLPA over the Southern Nevada was designed for a specific county, and so it's kind of a one-off. I would urge you to look at FLPA in part because it's something that is available to you now. It's proven. We've used it in New Mexico several times, and it's available west-wide. When you were before the Senate Appropriations Committee, we talked about this plan to potentially downsize the national park system by transferring some sites out of federal management to the states. And I sent you a follow-up letter on that. I very much appreciate that you replied to my letter, but what your reply did not include is just what sites might these be. Where are you in that process? Because we're several months now from the next budget year. And if this is going to be a serious proposal, the American people deserve to understand what's potentially on the list.
Yes, and I want to go back to your opening remarks that suggested that we would need to be disposing of hundreds and hundreds of these smaller park units to make up some kind of budget deficit. I just would say, having had an opportunity to dig into the Park Service budget, I don't think that's the case. I think we've got a tremendous amount of overhead that we're operating. I mean, across the federal government in general, across Interior in general, and I think that as I learned as governor of North Dakota, when we were able to reduce spending by 27%, there was a lot of anxiety when we had to do that, but we were able to do that and not. We actually increased the money that went to our parks. We created a new state park in North Dakota even after reducing budgets because we took cost out of the I call the overhead that was occurring in the Capitol.
That's precisely why we need a plan, right? So that we're not arguing over hypotheticals, that we're arguing over real numbers. So given the fact that this is a budget year that we have to deal with now as the Congress, I want to understand what those real impacts are, what the sites are that are being considered. Is that a list or a plan that you can get us, in a week, in a month?
Certainly not in a week, because one of the challenges we're having on, even if we have a proposal like this, one of the things I found that's I would say really almost staggering from an operational standpoint is that the systems that we have make it almost impossible to get information. I hear regularly about, we've got 330 million people visiting parks. Those aren't 330 million different people. Those are visitor days, but then we often don't even have the data to find out, are those people that live in the local community? Are they international visitors? How often? I mean, if you're going to dispose of something like the Knife River Indian Village in North Dakota that I think only may have less than 1,000 visitors in an entire season, and yet we've got a park superintendent and other people there and federal dollars, and that would fit in my own state nicely into our State Historic Society framework, which could then take advantage of local resources to manage it. Our target would be to look at the places that have very low visitation, but even if you would ask a question like, hey, please give me the visitation by each of these over 400 sites, that there's numbers that they're not good data on that. So it's going to be difficult to make great decisions quickly. We just have to try to create the data framework because I would want to have any decisions we make be data-driven, and that's going to make it more difficult to identify how we can do things that make sense from a budget standpoint.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, the ranking member. Secretary, welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to jump back to a public lands conversation that you had with the ranking member. In Nevada, as you well know, and thank you for being there, by the way. I appreciate your working with our state and along with HUD. But in Nevada, we support public land sales, particularly in southern Nevada, within the parameters that are set by SNPMA. And I thank you again. You identified SNPMA as a model, and I think it is a model, because the model was created and requires robust stakeholder engagement that really addresses all of the varied land management issues we need to work together, from affordable housing to economic development to addressing our infrastructure needs, our water needs. It's a stakeholder group, and it is important we have that. And the money actually comes back to BLM to the benefit of the lands, the federal lands in the state of Nevada. But here's my challenge. You talk about the benefits, and it should be a model, but in action, you're not actually doing that. And through reconciliation, instead of supporting the model that you talk about and tout, and the ranking member, excuse me, the chairman also talks about this as well and invokes Harry Reid all the time, but the reconciliation package doesn't really true to the SNPMA model. In fact, in the House side, I'm assuming working with the administration, the reconciliation package included federal land sales, but those federal land sales, and particularly in southern Nevada, weren't near areas where we could actually do affordable housing. Here's a map of Clark County. It's 8,000 square miles. This is the area where Las Vegas is, and this is where the boundary we want to expand to address affordable housing and other issues. But in the reconciliation package on the House side, the pink areas are the federal land you identified, in the middle of the desert. There's no infrastructure. I don't know any builder who's going to build housing in the middle of the desert. It makes no sense. And now I'm hearing there's a proposal by the chairman of this committee, again, to put this back into reconciliation, because that was taken out of reconciliation. It wasn't well thought out and wasn't working with the local communities to figure out how we actually build affordable housing and use the federal lands to the benefit of everybody living in those states. But now I'm hearing that there is a proposal going to be put back into reconciliation to allow the federal government to sell up to 2 million acres of federal land. Is that correct?
I understand that there's some consideration of that, but I don't believe that's been formally introduced yet.
Okay, and so if you're going to look at selling up to 2 million acres of federal land, and most of that land is across the West, what states will be involved in that process?
Well, I would say that if the law passes, you know, what we would do as an executive branch is follow the law. But generically, I think when anybody's looked at land sales, they would look at the states that have been most overburdened by the federal government percentage, and among the top of that, Nevada, Alaska, Idaho, and Utah are among the states that have the highest percentage of federal land. They also
in certain states like Montana might be exempted.
Not familiar with that or understand why that would be or not be that.
And then so who are you working with in my state? If you believe that SNPLMA is a model and the stakeholders should be engaged because it makes sense, we don't want something like this where you're selling land that doesn't, it's not going to benefit you because it's not a high dollar value. It's not going to help us because it's not going to build affordable housing. So who are you working with in my state as stakeholders as we look to, as you're looking to sell some of the federal land in Nevada? Who are you talking to?
Well, we're not, I got 100 things on my plate, and right now the only activity that we're involved in on a day-to-day basis in Nevada is following the existing law, which is the Southern Nevada Lands Act.
But you just said you're going to be selling up to 2 million acres across the West.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, you're not going to be selling up to 2 million acres of land, looking at 2 million acres of federal land in reconciliation package. I thought you said you were.
No, I think you said that, and I said that that's understand that proposal may be coming, but.
Oh, okay, so it's a proposal. So as it may be coming, and if it becomes law, who would you be talking to in my state as you look to sell federal land in the state of Nevada?
This is a hypothetical about something that hasn't been introduced and hasn't been passed. And
It's
so
coming. I mean, it's going to be dropping here any minute now. We're going to see a reconciliation package. I'm told there's going to be a sale of federal land in it. You can't deny that. Or you're telling me that maybe federal land will not, the sale of federal land will not be in the reconciliation package?
Wouldn't this be something the Senate would be debating?
I would hope so. And that's why I'm asking you, because we have not seen anything. The chairman has it. He has the information. It's behind closed doors. I'm assuming they're talking with the administration because you're going to be taking the lead on all of it. So you're before me now, and that's why I'm asking you the question. So if you don't know, then I'm really concerned, and we should all be concerned across the West. So that's my concern here. And I think from my perspective, and many of us in the Western states, I would hope as you're looking at selling federal land that impacts our states, you're going to be working with us to address that. And you talked about SNPLMA being a model, but the money comes back into BLM for the purpose of these Western states, not into the Treasury to reduce a deficit. So you're also going to be looking to changing the formula. Isn't that correct?
Well, I think you're acting like I'm proposing legislation.
Well,
And
I'm
I think
concerned that you're the lead agency and they're not talking to you about how the federal lands are going to be sold. Is that so? Maybe I'm assuming something that is not happening here. You have no involvement in the reconciliation package when it comes to the sale of federal land?
I think what I would say, which I've said here many times, is the same principles which I can repeat over and over again, which is it would only make sense for us to sell sell federal lands if we were.
I get the principle, but are you actively engaged in the negotiations in the reconciliation package?
I'm not actively engaged in negotiations.
You're not actively engaged at all in the conversation around the sale of federal lands in the reconciliation package, the proposal. You're not involved in that.
There's conceptual talks about how that would lay out, but there has not been negotiations.
Okay. I am running out of time. I'm going to submit the rest of my questions for the record. Let me just say this. This is not antagonistic. This is about how we work together. In the state of Nevada, over 80% of the land is owned by the federal government. We have always wanted a good relationship, and I work towards that 100%. And I look forward to that continue. But you can't come here and say that you support a model program that was started by Senator Reed in Snippelma and then upend it and completely do something different. And that's all I'm looking for is accountability with this administration and working with us and doing what they say they are going to do to the benefit of everybody in the state of Nevada. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will add here, the language will be out shortly. These things take time. We've been going through the Republican side BIRD process. We're going to be releasing bill text soon. Anything on public land sales, and this will involve a public process that goes, that would be part of any sale. Senator Justice. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Mr. Secretary. And I know when you came to see me, you didn't know a whole lot about the details of the clean energy tax law that I wrote, and particularly its manufacturing encouragement and the critical minerals. And so I want to talk to you about where we are now. I believe the administration today on this technology neutral law is making an unforced error because the administration with the House bill is basically taking clean energy sources off the table. Now, just in the last couple of days, energy company owners that have gas plants, they have gas holdings, are saying they need more energy now and that renewables have got to be part of that equation. So my question to you is, why not work with us here in the Senate so that we can fix these provisions in the House bill on renewables that basically are putting clean energy through bureaucratic water torture? Let's clean that up, and as a result, we could do more to work together for your concept of energy dominance, market growth, and more than anything, do it without mandates. That's what the law says today. Why not go that route and clean up the House bill now?
Well, Senator, I would love to connect with you following this hearing and learn more about the gas plant operators that you're saying need more.
Ketchum, the head of Ketchum, who's the president's hometown utility, said, I need electrons now. Get them to me from any possible source. But renewables got to be part of it. So why can't we make that part of your agenda?
Well, I would say the House bill reflects, I think, a priority, which is that we need to have reliable and affordable. And some of what we tend to call as renewables would fall into the category of being intermittent and expensive. And so I think that that's been the...
This is about creating choices, and my time is short. There are no mandates here. I understand you are interested in issues relating to batteries. That can deal with intermittent questions. But let's get down to fixing this flawed House bill that executives are now all over Capitol Hill saying that we really like technology neutral. We like the concept. We want to make it work. Right now it includes provisions that make the provisions with respect to international aspects unworkable. They call this kill the American business structure. We need to correct those kinds of provisions. I'd like you to be part of that, and we'll follow up with you. Let me talk to you next about the parks. We're having terrible problems with respect to Crater Lake. The superintendent of this treasure left because he didn't have the staff to protect it. Now, you all are saying that these reports say that visitors can have the same kind of experience this year that they've had in the past. That's not what we're hearing in Oregon. What we're hearing in Oregon, you know, they have problems even with volunteers running the show. So my question on this issue is, can you make a commitment to work with me to ensure that all the national park sites in Oregon have the staff and resources they need?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say at this time that we do have, as we know, had thousands of positions that we filled for summer, hiring in the parks. In addition to summer help in the parks, also wildland firefighters. And so if anybody's listening, we're still hiring at the parks for summer positions. So would be happy to continue to work with you on staffing up.
Last one is on wildfire. I can tell you we're expecting more heat in Oregon than we thought we were going to have, particularly in Eastern Oregon. Federal staffing is well behind where it should be because of the hiring freeze. Can you assure Oregonians today that despite these issues, we're going to have the firefighting staff that we need?
Yes, because there is no hiring freeze on wildland firefighters, and we're staffed between Interior and U.S. Forest Service about identically where we were last year at about 17,000 firefighters. If there's a discrepancy in Oregon, we'll be happy to look at that.
I have a few seconds left. I want to go back to my first request. My door is open to work with you on this question of a technology-neutral policy. It makes sense. The markets like it. Companies like it. It would allow us, particularly in the case of somebody having gas holdings, to do something now about this great need when we're concerned about AI to make sure we have enough energy. You're interested in that. But we've got to fix the problems in the House bill because companies are telling me they are drowning in the bureaucracy and trying to figure out how it would work. We can do better than this, and we'd like to work with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to note, I don't have questions this morning about critical minerals, but I'm glad to hear Senator Hoeven and the Secretary engage in that conversation. Mr. Secretary, the invitation remains open to come visit Lithium Valley in Southern California and see the tremendous potential there for lithium and other critical materials as well. Feels like it's been years since you were here for your confirmation hearing and your vote in our previous conversation. So I'm hoping you're enjoying the job. It's everything you were looking forward to and then some. But look, we're knee deep on a number of issues and concerns, so I'll get right into it. As I'm sure you're aware, the Department of Justice just yesterday published an opinion that asserts that the presidents have the authority to abolish national monuments. I know the chairman made a reference to that in his remarks earlier today. I believe this is an extremely dangerous opinion that flies in the face of 90 years of precedent. And you and I discussed this when you were coming through for confirmation because we worked very hard in recent years on establishing and expanding monuments in California in a very thoughtful and balanced way. So this is personal for me. Given the recent opinion, I do need to ask you for the record, what are your intentions towards recently designated national monuments in California, which, as I've shared with you, enjoy strong bipartisan support, not just at the federal level, but from local and tribal leaders as well?
Thank you, Senator. And I do want to tell you, I would love to accept your invitation to come out and visit. And of course, California does have some of the top critical mineral resources in the country and can play a really important role in our national security. So look forward to talking to you about that. On the monuments, we have a responsibility and direction to take a look at the recently created ones. I think this is something that we all know. If you just, again, we do have the data on that. Most of these monuments have been created in the last weeks and months of presidential terms, and always under the idea that they were, everyone was consulted. I have had people in my office, not for the ones in California, but I've had people in my office saying, hey, we weren't consulted. So again, as we listen to the feedback from tribes and citizens and others around the country, we have a responsibility to get on the ground and do some ground truth. And I think the question is not whether their monuments serve a purpose. I think the real question is the size that generally comes up, because there are people in communities when we create restrictions on land use that does restrict some of their economic opportunity, and we want to listen to those as well. But again, we're looking for a balanced approach, and happy to continue that dialogue with you.
Well, I appreciate that, but just, again, for the record, recognizing states in the West tend to be larger than states in the East. So the appropriateness and size of monuments and other areas of designation tend to be larger because of the acres that we're talking about. You mentioned engagement and consultation in the creation of monuments. That absolutely happened, as you know, in California, so I appreciate you recognizing the distinction. If it's going to be revisited or undone, we expect that same level of engagement on the back end before any action is taken or before any decisions are made. I know my time is limited. Let me move to another topic. As you and I have talked in the past, water, so important to California, to everybody, but especially California. The Department of Reclamation, according to reports, has lost 1,400 public servants, approximately 25% of the agency's entire workforce. In the Bureau of Reclamation's regional office in Sacramento, there used to be 50 staff handling financial issues alone, and now there's only 12. This is the staff that works to approve contracts, grants, agreements, et cetera. Yet the Bureau of Reclamation's California office has cut its staff responsible for these aspects of water infrastructure by nearly 80%. Will you commit to look at the number of finance staff at Reclamation's California regional office to ensure that there's sufficient capacity there to meet the administrative needs of our critical water infrastructure and investments?
Yes, happy to, for sure, take a look at that. I'm a little surprised at the 80% because the only reductions would have been so far through people taking one of the early retirement options, unless in that data, and my team can follow up, because we did take some people that are in finance, HR, and IT and roll them up to the Secretary's office because we felt there was an opportunity for unification at a broader level, state, versus say regional. So I want to make sure that some of those people, I'm just wondering if they're still there, they're just being accounted in another area.
Well, if they're accounted, but also where is their work, what are their roles and responsibilities, and have they changed to still be California specific or more broad for the department? I know my time is up. Let me just put a pin in both on the reclamation side, how critical it is not just for within California infrastructure, but also, as we've discussed multiple times, the role reclamation plays for all the Colorado River states, both the lower basin and the upper basin. So we're going to be calling each other more frequently yet again after this hearing. And lastly, we'll submit for the record questions about the cuts to the U.S. Geological Survey. They play a critical role in developing Shake Alert, the nation's only public earthquake early alert system that more than 50 million Americans depend on. Technology's come a long way. It can be very helpful to save lives and minimize damage in the event of inevitable earthquakes. And so I want to revisit some of the budget cuts to that program as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, which I consider a higher title than secretary or senator, just so you know. I'm disappointed.
As a former governor.
That's right. Oh, yes, that's true. I'm disappointed, Mr. Secretary, with the budget, particularly for the National Park Service. First is what materials we've been given. This is the budget justification for the National Park Service for the 2025 budget that's submitted to Congress so that we have something we can work from and work with. That's 2025. This is what we've been given this year for 2026. That's an insult to the Congress. That's not adequate to give us the data that we need in order to make the oversight decisions, because we don't know the details of what's being done. There's some boilerplate in here about how we're going to make things more efficient. It's hard for me to understand how gutting America's best idea isn't America's worst idea. A 37% cut in the National Park Service budget, which was already underfunded, I don't believe is responsible. The word stewardship has come up in this hearing several times. That ain't stewardship. Here's some some data. This is visitation at our national parks going back to 2010. The blue bars are visitation. The orange is staff at the National Park Service. So you can see there was already a growing disparity back in 2010. This is where staffing was. This is where visitation was. Here's where we are as of this budget. Right here. That's where we are as of this budget. We were already woefully understaffed, and you're talking about cutting the budget by another third. Now, my real question is why? The $1.2 billion you're cutting from the National Park Service is devastating to the National Park Service. It doesn't amount to anything in terms of our federal budget. I did a calculation. If our federal budget was the height of this room, what you're cutting from the National Park Service is the combined height of 2 credit cards. In other words, to save virtually no money from the federal budget, we're devastating one of America's treasures. And that's what I don't understand. And you yourself a few minutes ago said we don't have the data, you don't have the visitation data. This is ready, fire, aim. How about waiting a year, developing the data, finding out what it is, because you can't convince me that a detailed analysis of the National Park Service took place in the last couple of months to justify this pitiful submission to this committee. So I'm anxious to hear. We all know the term bang for the buck. This is damage for the buck. This is huge damage to the Park Service for a very minimal return in terms of reduction of the deficit, reduction of our federal budget. Why in the world, given your commitment to the national parks, the new park, the Teddy Roosevelt Park in your state, why did you let them do this?
Well, Senator, I want to just first, appreciate the chart that you're holding up behind there. I believe that number, if I can see it correctly, probably is the full-time staffing as opposed to the summer and seasonal. I think that we actually have, it's a mix. I think that line I'm trying to see there.
Well, you allowed more seasonals for this year, but I understand only half of them have been hired, and we're in the summer right now.
Well, more than half have been hired, but I think, again, this is a mix. Again, when I just got back from a trip to Alaska, I was at Kenai Fjords. This is a, beautiful and amazing park. The road gets plowed in May. It snows over in November. This is a classic case where we need a lot of staffing. Cruise ships are stopping in Seward. They get, hundreds of thousands of visitors over a 3-4 month period. And then in the wintertime, the visitor centers aren't even open. So we have to figure out a way to be able to do flex staffing. It's not just as simple as the raw number. And the one number that I was able to get—
The raw number, there may be details in here, but it's pretty unmistakable, the trend on this chart. And
well, but the other thing—
I don't understand. You're saving a very small amount of money. You're gutting I looked it up last night. The National Park Service is the most popular federal agency. The most popular federal agency. Why in the world would you target this agency, particularly when you yourself in your testimony today said, I don't have the data?
Well, we're working—
That's ready, fire, aim. Get the data, understand the details of the budget. Give us something like this, and then we can decide what the plan should be, to echo the Vice Chair. What's the plan for doing this in a thoughtful way, not an arbitrary way of, all probationary employees and that kind of thing?
Well, in that thick book that you have there, I'm certain that there's one thing that's missing, which is how many of those people actually work in a park? Because we spent 8 weeks this spring rebuilding all the HR data to find out, of all the people you have in your chart, how many work in a park. Because the real issue that citizens want is, do I have an interpretive person? Do I have a ranger? Do I have, are the bathrooms clean? And so part of that is making sure that we have fewer people working, in places like Washington, D.C., more people working in the parks. I believe that we can reduce what we spend in overhead in the park and have more people actually working in the parks. And in a place like Yellowstone this summer, there are more people right now on the ground in Yellowstone than there were 3 years ago.
And I'd like to see that plan before you submit a budget that cuts the budget by 37%. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I would just want to say one thing, Mr. Chairman. Chairman. It's one thing that we're in a sad point in America if we say that cutting $1 billion is meaningless or it's as thin as a piece of paper. We're all Americans. We are all part of a budget thing. Last year, this country spent $2,000 billion more than we brought in. That's what a $2 trillion deficit is. And it's to think that we can't find savings in every agency, particularly when we've got, decades-old IT systems and way too many people in overhead. I mean, we just have to all agree that we can be more efficient and still deliver great services at places like our national parks. We can do both of those things. It's not an either or. These are false trade-offs. We can have better experiences at the park, better staffing at the parks, and we can have fewer people working for the national park system. My best guess is that barely half of the people of that number actually work in a park. The rest are in some other jobs.
Part of the responsibility of the National Park Service is stewardship and resource management, not necessarily being park rangers. That's part of the responsibility of the Organic Act of the National Parks. And I'd point out that $600 billion of that deficit that you mentioned could be covered by better enforcement at the IRS of a lot of people not paying their taxes. $600 billion, that's the estimate that the deficit could be reduced. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Burgum, good to see you. I think that there's a big theme here about public lands. And I join my colleagues, the ranking member and senator from Nevada, who've asked you about the selling of public lands. But we've already had this debate here. We had a very big debate here. So my state, obviously, we like public lands. It's a juggernaut of an economy. So when you think of our state, you think of ports and parks, and you think of $22 billion and over 200,000 jobs. So it's big money to us. So we led a fight with many of our colleagues on this committee to get permanent funding for LWCF, to get it reauthorized and permanent funding. In fact, this, if you'll hold that up, is an actual quote from the President of the United States during the big battle. He said, "I'm calling on Congress to send me a bill that permanently funds LWCF and restores our parks. I'll sign it into law. It will be historic, and it will be for our public lands." Okay, so that, I was there, I was at the bill signing. I know what it says. It basically says you have to do acquisition. It is setting in law the amount of money that should be spent on acquisition. So when we're talking here this morning, we're all amazed that you seem to be putting forth a budget that is basically saying, I don't want to acquire, I want to actually sell public lands. What we figured out as a coalition of people, hunters, fishermen, outdoor recreationists, travel and tourism people, we figured out that it's a juggernaut of an economy and we want to grow it. And we were able to get President Trump to sign a bill. So now your budget, and I asked you about this at your confirmation hearing, I asked you specifically whether, if confirmed, you said, I will implement the law as enacted by Congress. Well, the law enacted by Congress basically says that you have to spend 40% of this LWCF funds and make acquisition. It doesn't say sell public lands, it says acquire lands. So I don't know how you're proposing a budget that basically is going in the opposite direction of what was, let me refresh my memory, 60 sponsors in the Senate, 254 in the House. This was not a little decision. This was putting to bed this notion that, oh, it's either I'm going to fix some roads in our forest or I'm going to do land acquisition. Now, I get, even the chairman, he and I have had many conversations, as did his former colleague from Utah, Mr. Bishop. We've had many conversations about LWCF in the past. I get some of their issues that they have brought up about LWCF, but Congress voted and President Trump signed the law. Now we're asking you to implement it. And so I want to understand how you're proposing anything other than following the Dingell Act.
Well, certainly we'll continue and we'll follow the law, and I think that what we're having here is we shouldn't be confused that two things can happen at the same time, which is, and it's about which lands and which acquisitions, because 40% of the LWCF is a pretty small number relative to the scale. I mean, it's meaningful, hundreds of millions of dollars. But the opportunity for us to accelerate purchases, say, of infill and fill out the squares where we might be acquiring land for the federal government that is a private in-holding inside of a national park?
We do it all the time. One of the biggest things we used LWCF for is because the federal government kept having to spend money because a road washed out.
Yes.
In accessing Mount Rainier. So we basically acquired more land, built the road on a different thing, so we weren't paying $250,000 every few years. So we're all for that.
Yeah, and
we're not for, but we're for following the Dingle Act, following the law of the Great Outdoors Act, and making sure that we are actually doing acquisition. Why? Because we have figured out, I think somebody said during that time, that it was the third biggest industry behind finance and healthcare. So we figured out that it is a big economic engine for our nation. So we want to see it. Now, I get that you have people here who didn't succeed in that battle and who may not believe that, but this was bipartisan, bicameral, and we need that support. I want to just mention—
I'm just saying both of these things can happen at the same time. You can take LWCF
Your
lands.
budget doesn't say that, and I think it's heading to a catastrophe, so that's why I'm bringing it up. On the fire point, we have a big fire in Cle Elum right now. They aren't getting the direction. I hear what you just described as governor and the issues, but this is where we're heading. This is where we are now. This is where we're going to be, what is this, September? All of this in red. So we have a fire in Cle Elum now, and we need direction. We need to know. My constituents want to know what are people going to do to help coordinate with Interior and the Forest Service. We need to know now. So if you could help us with that, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now recognize Ranking Member Huffman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I wish I had more time to get into this disparagement of renewables, because your own state, Mr. Secretary, has 40% wind energy power in North Dakota nearby, and Iowa, it's 60% plus.
We have 40%.
My time, Mr. Secretary, 60% plus. Some of the lowest electricity rates, one of the most reliable grids in the country. So we could absolutely have a robust debate about some of the things you just said, but I want to ask you about this balance sheet philosophy, because you said nobody liquidates assets unless they're going out of business, but we've all seen corporate raiders like Carl Icahn build entire careers, taking over family-run businesses and raiding their employee pension funds. It happens all the time in private equity. But public lands should not be like that. And so I want to give you a chance to assure us that you're more like Teddy Roosevelt and less like Carl Icahn when it comes to managing our federal estate. You recently said that in your Senate testimony, that you were not proposing to sell off or divest any of the 63 so-called crown jewel national parks. But there are 370 other units managed by the national park system. These are places created by Congress that allow people across the country to get the national park experience in their own communities. They range from the MLK National Historical Park to Belmont Paul Women's Equality National Monument, Teddy Roosevelt Birthplace Historical Site, other beloved units that are critical to telling the American story. So simple yes or no, Mr. Secretary, will you allow the sale or divestiture of any of these units of the national park system to state, local, or private entities?
I can give examples of
yes or no, sir? It's a straight-up question.
I don't think it's a straight-up question. I thought you wanted to have a dialogue, but the dialogue—
I don't want a dialogue. I want a yes or a no. Will you allow any of those units to be sold or divested?
Well, thank you for being clear that you don't want a dialogue.
All right, I want a limited dialogue.
This is not a yes or no answer. I mean, you can ask me for a yes or no, but it's not a yes or no, because this would require a thoughtful approach.
So I'm hearing, Mr. Secretary, that the sale or divestiture of some of those units is on the table. Is that fair?
Well, take Knife River Indian Village in North Dakota. Less than 1,000 visitors. We've got we have a superintendent. We have federal resources there.
Mr. Secretary, I'm just going to take that as a yes. I have limited time and more questions. So you have said that you—
But would you support us? The greatest gift we can give—
I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here to ask them, sir. So I know you said you're traveling the country listening to Park Service personnel.
I was attempting
I'm
to give you—
trying to get to a question. So you said you're listening to National Park Service personnel. I want to ask you about Alcatraz, because I represent that park unit. There is no one in the National Park Service, from the superintendent down to the janitor, who would tell you turning Alcatraz into a federal prison again is a good idea. Will you listen to your Park Service personnel on subjects like that, or will you go along with Donald Trump when he proposes something crazy in order to try to stick it to Nancy Pelosi for political reasons? Yes or no?
Well, I work for the President of the United States, and the Park Service is part of the executive branch, and the Park Service reports up through the executive branch. So while we want to listen to everybody, it's a, frontline soldiers don't get to decide whether or not we go into war or not. I mean, you're asking a hypothetical question.
But
which
isn't
is,
it your job to keep crazy, purely political things that are destructive to your agency off the table?
Well, it's completely subjective on a definition of how you're describing an idea.
Has anyone in the Park Service told you that's a good idea to reopen Alcatraz as a prison?
I'm happy to get consultation from locals, from National Park, whatever, but it's a pejorative in terms of where you're describing these ideas.
Sir, I really do hope you will listen to your Park Service personnel. Now, I want to
You think
ask you...
is the Park Service personnel in charge of the decisions around the nation's
I just hope
resources?
you listen to them. You've said that you're doing a listening tour with them. I hope you will listen to them. Now, you have said that American public lands are assets that should be leveraged to pay down the national debt. Finance experts, including the former Republican director of the CBO, have said your proposal could only work if the U.S. entered into agreements with our foreign creditors to put specific lands up as collateral. I want to ask you specifically, because some of these creditors are China, Canada, France, India, Saudi Arabia, UAE. Will you put American public lands up as collateral in agreements with any of these foreign interests?
No, and the thing that you've just suggested has never been discussed, never been in a meeting with that, so I don't even know where that idea came from. You're talking about leverage, meaning debt, but we're talking about if we want to run advertisements to the American people and say, you own part of $36.5 trillion of debt, which we do every time we have a presidential campaign, we should also be running ads and say, Americans, you own part of a, $100 trillion, $200 trillion of assets?
You have repeatedly said we should use our public lands to eliminate the national debt.
Yes, because we're getting a horrifically poor return on the assets that we have in our country. If our national balance sheet's worth $100 trillion and Interior pulled in $20 billion, a 1% return on a $100 trillion balance sheet would be $1 trillion. We'd have all kinds of money for you guys to appropriate to spend on deferred maintenance. Our parks would be sustainable forever. These are simple things, but we've got the greatest resources: land, minerals, rare earth minerals, wind, solar. I mean, you name all the resources we have on public land. We're managing them in a way where we're getting really horrifically bad returns. And there's nothing contrary with getting good returns. I mean, some of the companies that have the highest return in the country are also the greatest stewards of the assets that they manage. We can do the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I hope we'll have a second round, because this is too important to not do justice to this issue.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes, gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. Thank you for your testimony. Do you believe that your agency has sufficient personnel to fight what will be a very difficult wildfire season this year?
We do. We're at about exactly the same head count on wildland firefighters as last year.
Let me ask you about that number. So how many wildland firefighting personnel are currently employed by the Interior Department?
Between DOI and...
I'm talking about the Interior Department. I understand with respect to the Agriculture Department and the Forest Service. I'm asking about the Interior Department specifically.
You can ask specifically, but Brooke Rollins and I are committed to working together on this to make sure we optimize.
Mr. Secretary, here, hold on. This is not a gotcha question. Hold on. I went online this morning, the Department of Interior's website. It says 5,780 total number of federal wildland fire personnel employed by the Interior Department in 2024, right? Your predecessor published that number online so the American people could understand how many people in your agency. This isn't a gotcha. I'm just trying to figure out how many people are, what is that number for 2025? It's June of 2025.
It's essentially the same as last year, because we're flat across both agencies at about 17,000
Will you commit to providing the public and us with the number, with updating the website so that we understand how many fire personnel are employed by the Interior Department?
We'll be completely transparent on all that. I'm trying to give you an answer to that question, but.
Well, but I hear you. You're representing that it's close or essential or similar. I guess I'm just trying to get some representations that we have not lost fire personnel since last year, because as you probably know, I'm sure you're aware, the Forest Service has lost many red card holders. So much so that the chief of the Forest Service put out a video earlier this week imploring those whom had been terminated from the agency to come back. Do you know how many red card holders have left the Interior Department in the last 6 months?
I do not.
You don't know how many red card holders have left your agency?
Well, if they would have left, they would have left through early retirement. We've got 13,000 that
Wouldn't
we're
that
hiring.
be something that's important to know? How many red card holders have left your agency so that we'd be ready for the fire season? I mean, again, I guess that would be another piece of data that I think would be important for this committee to consider, but I'll move on.
And you're aware that we have 13,000 flex.
I hear you. I'm well aware of that, and I'm also concerned that your agency is apparently not keeping track of the red card holders that have been purged from your agency. But in any event, let's talk about the National Park Service.
Can I just say there's been no purging?
Sir,
Why do people keep saying purging? Because
sir, Mr. Secretary,
law
I'm
enforcement.
going to ask you a question about the National Park Service. Give me an opportunity to ask you a question.
Can I say?
Do you believe the National Park Service?
You said something that's not true.
Mr. Chairman,
you said it wasn't a
I'm gonna reclaim my
gotcha.
time and ask you to stop the clock so I can ask the Secretary some questions. So let's talk about the National Park Service. How many positions of superintendent are vacant within the National Park Service?
A number of superintendents are vacant because of the.
I'm not asking you why. I'm just asking you how many. It's not. These aren't gotcha questions. How many are vacant? Is it 1? Is it 10? We've heard that it's 100. Is 100 accurate?
We have a number of superintendents.
You won't say what the number is?
I'll be happy to get you this. We're filling positions when a
Mr. Secretary, I mean, honestly, like, these aren't gotcha questions. If I ask a simple question.
Of course these are gotcha questions.
It's a gotcha question to ask
you won't even
how
let me
many
answer the
superintendent
question.
positions are vacant. I'll ask you why, but I first want to know the premise, which is how many are vacant. You and I both know that there are roughly 100 superintendent positions that are vacant across the country. Now, you have said that the $1 billion cut that you've proposed to the National Park Service represents cuts to overhead, right? Redundancies. I've heard you say that publicly previously, right? I'm not mischaracterizing that, I don't think. It's red tape, right? That's the kind of stuff that you're trying to cut from the National Park Service? Is that incorrect?
We're trying to cut jobs that aren't in parks. And if there's a vacancy at a superintendent, we fill it with the deputy. So it's incorrect for you to say that we have vacancies because when a superintendent takes early retirement, superintendents are at the end of their career.
We call that, when there's not a superintendent at one of our national parks, when the position is vacant, I think most American people would describe that as vacant. But in any event, what I will just say to you is that while you are cutting the National Park Service by $1 billion, or at least proposing a cut of $1 billion, cutting seasonal and temporary employees, 39% down within the National Park Service, I find it very interesting that your agency is issuing red tape edicts to national parks to put up signage for rewriting of American history at these national parks. It strikes me that perhaps the agency should be more focused on supporting our national parks, on fighting wildfires, on managing these important national jewels of the system, rather than spending its time on red tape requirements. But I see I am out of time. I appreciate the chairman's indulgence. I'll yield back.
Time has expired. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from New Mexico, Ms. Ledger Fernandez, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary. So I want to tell you a little story. In 1991, toxic waste spilled from a closed hard rock mine into the Pecos River, poisoning our precious water. The rural communities who depend on that water finally, after years of work, convinced BLM and the Forest Service to protect the Upper Pecos watershed from mining. But the Trump administration recently reversed this withdrawal without any explanation. And the Pecos is just one example of the Trump administration giving away lands to the lowest bidder. Really bad return on the investment. Mr. Secretary, how much did the Department of Interior collect in royalties last year from hard rock mining under the General Mining Act of 1872?
Well, Based on your sign behind you, I think the answer might be 0.
Exactly. And you know why we collected 0? We did collect 0. I'm glad that you can read. But this is the point. You said earlier that we need to have a return on our investments, and we are collecting 0 from hard rock mining. And more concerning, you also complained about the idea of China controlling this area. Well, I have legislation, and I have sought through amendment to prevent foreign adversaries, to prevent foreign corporations from mining our precious resources and giving the United States nada, nothing. I would ask you, would you support that kind of legislation to require foreign corporations and especially foreign adversaries to pay royalties so that we can get our return on our investment?
I not only, yes, absolutely would support it, but I don't think we should be allowing foreign adversaries to mine critical minerals in our country.
Well, I'm glad that you support that, because right now we have Rio Tinto, which is 15% owned by China, and they should not be mining in culturally important places like Oak Flats. So we will work with you to see if we can stop that. Mr. Secretary, I want to move to another pretty important place in New Mexico. As you know, Chaco Canyon is a World Heritage Site. It is precious, it is irreplaceable. And after years of studies, years of negotiations between all affected tribes, the Department of Interior protected Chaco Canyon through a withdrawal. Yet we hear that BLM is now considering reopening Chaco to oil and gas development. And you come from North Dakota, Mr. Secretary. You're a governor. You understand the importance of tribal sovereignty and of consultation, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want you to commit to sending somebody with decision-making authority to conduct in-person, individual tribal consultations with each tribe that has an interest in Chaco Canyon. Can you commit to that?
Absolutely, and of course, we hear that this and other monuments were, all the consultation was done, and then one of the first groups that came to visit me as Secretary of Interior was the Navajo, and the Navajo felt that they weren't consulted, particularly related to the buffer zone and the impingement on Navajo Alati's rights relative to the buffer zone around Chaco. So that's one of the specific areas that we'll be doing consultation on.
Right, and I think that if you look at the record, there was actually a lot of consultation. Now, that's why I'm asking you, I didn't say commit to keeping it. I want you to commit to keeping it. I think if you do the work and look at the fact that, oil and gas drilling, my district drilled more oil than your state. We are an oil and gas state. We understand the importance of all the resources. We believe in wind energy and solar energy, but we also depend on oil and gas. And you can drill for a molecule away from Chaco Canyon and get a return on your investment and not destroy irreplaceable cultural sites. And that's, I think, what we are looking for. Is not, don't drill it all in northwestern New Mexico, but don't do it where there are sacred, protected sites that can never, ever be replaced. A molecule of gas is going to be the same whether you pull it out from within the Chaco buffer zone or from outside. Thank you. I'm getting the little tick-tock. My time has expired. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Min, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Secretary, thank you for appearing here today. Now, in addition to being Secretary of the Interior, you also serve as Chair of the National Energy Dominance Council, which was created to develop a national energy dominance strategy to produce more energy, including by enhancing private sector investments in energy and focusing on innovation. I assume you are aware that as of 2024, China has 887 gigawatts of solar energy capacity, more than 6 times what we have here in the United States, and 521 gigawatts of wind energy, more than 3 times what we have here. Yes or no?
Yeah, yes, I'm aware, and I'm also aware that
Thank you. That was a yes or no question.
I'm aware that
Reclaiming
they-
my time.
that
And
they-
are you aware that wind and solar energy now account for 37% of the energy consumed by China? Yes or no?
Yes, and that.
I'm reclaiming my time.
Coal
Now, the Trump
represents 60%
reclaiming my
of
time.
those.
The Trump administration is, I believe, rightfully concerned about unfair trade policies by the CCP, which has heavily subsidized key strategic industries they see as areas of future growth and national security, including semiconductors and steel. And I'm going to ask you some yes or no questions. Please just refrain to that. Limit yourself to that. Would it surprise you to know that China has invested heavily in the renewable energy sector, including massive subsidies for large-scale batteries, electric vehicles, wind power, and solar panels? Yes or no?
Yes, I'm aware.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that in 2024, China accounted for 2/3 of the $2.1 trillion spent globally in subsidies for clean energy innovation?
It would not surprise me.
Thank you.
And it doesn't
Do you
surprise me
think
that
it's
they're also the
reclaiming
world's
my
largest
time?
polluter.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Do you think it's fair to say that China sees these as key sectors for future growth and for energy dominance? Again, yes or no, please.
63% of electricity comes from coal in
Thank you.
China.
I
They
think
added,
it's-
they
I think
added
it's-
94 gigawatts of coal last
Reclaiming
year.
my time. I think it's fairly clear that China and the rest of the world see renewable energy innovation as growth industries for the future. And that
China sees
I
all
didn't ask you
energy.
a question, Mr. Chair, reclaiming my time. And that we're currently in a competition with China over who will lead the way in this area. And as do many leading experts on national security, economics, and energy, who have described the battle over clean energy as critical for whether the United States or China will dominate the 21st century. One leading publication recently described the situation this way. The United States and China are in a contest for leadership of the industries of the future, including with respect to clean energy. However, while China is investing in renewables, the United States is poised to send up the white flag of surrender. Unless amended, the House budget bill moving forward this week, which was then passed, would eviscerate the tax incentives for clean energy and EVs that were part of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. If the House and Senate accept this language, this would be akin to unilateral disarmament, and China will be poised to dominate the commanding heights of the world's 21st century economy without even firing a shot. Again, yes or no question. Do you think it's consistent with national energy dominance for the United States to surrender the global clean energy market to China?
I disagree with the premise of all your arguments.
Do you support ending and eliminating the clean energy tax credits created and enhanced by the Inflation Reduction Act? Yes or no?
Yeah, I support the ending of them.
Okay, I want to switch. I would disagree with that, but I'll switch up topics a little bit. When we talk about subsidizing industries and sectors, something that IRA tried to do a little bit, do you think we should be subsidizing industries like horse farms? Yes or no? Wood-burning stoves? Yes or no?
I missed the second one.
Wood-burning stoves, horse farms, should we be subsidizing them? Would you agree that as a general rule, we should be looking to nurture and foster innovation and future technologies and not technologies of the past? Yes or no?
Well, innovation has always been the source of American greatness.
I agree with that. And I represent a district that has a lot of innovation. And yet I would submit to you that you and the Trump administration are looking to heavily subsidize oil, gas, and coal production while surrendering energy dominance in clean energy markets to China. And that is the opposite of investing in innovation. It's investing in past technologies. We can invest in horse and buggies. We can invest in wood burning. We could invest in coal and oil, but these are technologies of the past. Now, I know you're going to disagree with that premise, but I think that's very clear. China sees clean energy as being the markets of the future. Europe sees that. Most national security experts and energy experts agree with that. And so with that, I'll switch over to a different topic that was addressed a little bit by some of my colleagues before. But I also represent a district that is very vulnerable to wildfire. And unlike the Congress member that spoke before, when I talk to my federal employees, whether it's the National Park Service or U.S. Forest Service, they've consistently told me they don't have enough personnel. And so I'm going to ask you again, are you aware of how many red card employees that are tasked and licensed and trained to address wildfires have been let go during your time in the Interior?
If anyone's gone, they took early retirement. There's been no firings of wildland firefighters.
Do you know what level red card employees we had when you started and how many we have today?
We're certainly going to get that information and happy to provide it to you.
All right. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to submit 3 articles into the record. The first is titled Rollback of the Inflation Reduction Act with Surrender Economic Primacy to China. The second is called Job Creation Estimates Through Proposed Inflation Reduction Act. And the third is Clean Investment Monitor, tallying the 2-year impact of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Without objection, So ordered. Mr. Huffman, you're recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, the chair of the Subcommittee on Federal Lands, Mr. Tiffany.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm going to allow you to answer them. Has the Department of Interior and DOGE reviewed spending that has gone on in the Department of Interior, identifying things that are woke, DEI, waste, fraud, and abuse? Have you and/or DOGE entered into that exercise?
Yes, and at least within the Department of Interior, the work that's been done since the time that I have taken position has all been authorized and driven by me. There's no outside, quote, influence or whatever. We're looking for efficiency across all of that. But yes, we have undertaken that work.
Might we expect some items from Interior in a future rescissions bill?
I'm sorry?
Might we expect some items from the executive branch in a future rescissions bill?
Yes.
Will you be funding eco-grief trainings in the future in the Department of Interior like the previous administration?
I'm not familiar with that term.
You're not familiar with eco-grief?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, okay. Pittman-Robertson Fund, Dingle Johnson. I have a document here from the state of Wisconsin in regards to spending here, and the largest line item or a group item here is, I believe it's $17 million for PILT funding, payment in lieu of taxes, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Is that what we expect from those programs, is that they're paying payment in lieu of taxes rather than habitat restoration or whatever?
My understanding is that the Robertson Pittman should be going towards restoring habitat, so.
The thing that I would ask is, will the agency be reviewing Pittman-Robertson and Dingle-Johnson funds going out to the various states? Will there be accountability? Will you be asking the states to show what they are spending this money on, which is excise taxes from sportsmen, right?
Yes.
Will you be seeking accountability within the Department of Interior for those programs?
I'm going to take an action item right now from my team that's behind me that we should dig into this. Thank you for making me aware that some of that money may not be directed as it should, as required.
I've been really frustrated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. There was an incident in my district a couple years ago when it was 25 below on January 20, I believe it was the end of January, where a tribe shut down some roads. And I made a request to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, by the way, endangering people's lives, as you can imagine, shutting down 4 roads. And I made a request to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, could you share the information on those roads, because were they funded with public money? Because roads, my understanding is that roads cannot be shut down if they are being paid for by public dollars. The Bureau of Indian Affairs would not provide me that information, and it took a court order in order to get that information to find out what the appraisals were on those roads. Will we have greater transparency in regards to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and accountability to those of us in Congress that are simply asking questions?
Well, happy to work with you on that, sir.
So also in regards to Bureau of Indian Affairs and the budget for the Department of Interior, I've seen millions of dollars that have been dedicated to litigation, that the tribes are sent money that they can litigate. And I've heard from state actors like our Department of Natural Resources a number of years ago that this money was being used against them in the state of Wisconsin. And I'm hearing from tribal interests who are saying, we need money for housing, we need money for law enforcement, stuff like that. Could you do a thorough review to make sure that there's things that are being funded, and being from North Dakota, I'm sure you're very familiar with the needs of Indian country. Rather than spending it on litigation, can we spend it on other things that seem to be more important, like housing and law enforcement?
That's an excellent suggestion. Thank you, sir.
And are you aware that I've heard from researchers that you have to put climate change in any of the, if you're seeking to receive a grant from the Department of Interior, as well as other agencies like the EPA, will you be issuing grants that can be done for a variety of purposes, not simply having to have climate change in in order to receive that funding from the federal government.
I wasn't aware, that may have been a requirement in the past, but going forward, that will not be a requirement.
I'd be happy to share information in regards to that. And I hope at some point you get a chance to comment on how we can update the national park system to do the things that would give greater flexibility and maximizing the visitor experience in our national park system. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Minnesota, the chair of the Subcommittee on Energy and Minerals, Mr. Stauber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Burgum, thank you for being here. As you know well, Northeast Minnesota, my district, is home to the Duluth Complex, the largest untapped copper nickel find in the entire world. The previous administration did not recognize the importance of this. In fact, the Biden administration enacted illegal mining ban covering 225,504 acres in the Superior National Forest. Yesterday, I met with Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins, and she provided assurances that her department would work to reverse this illegal mining ban, which was a stated goal of the President Trump during his campaign. Shortly after our meeting, she publicly announced that her department would soon formally request the Bureau of Land Management begin the process to administratively reverse this illegal withdrawal. Mr. Secretary, will you commit today that your department will work to reverse Biden's illegal mining ban in northern Minnesota, as well as work to return the leases that were stripped from multiple companies seeking to responsibly develop critical minerals within the Superior National Forest under the most strict environmental and labor standards?
Representative, the answer is yes, and look forward to working, again, appreciate the support from Secretary Rollins, but what you're touching on here is of absolutely essential to our national defense, as people may have read in the press yesterday. But I mean, we're in a position where China has a stranglehold. They control 85% of rare earth mineral refining on the top 10 of the mid and heavy rare earth minerals. It's 100%. And we can't build a fighter jet, a car, a cell phone, an MRI machine. We can't build anything in this country without those. And we've allowed ourselves to get into a position where we've got an adversary that completely controls the entire global supply chain. We've got to get back into mining in this country for national security reasons.
Thank you. Switching gears now to an issue involving the gray wolf in the Endangered Species Act. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources officials estimate we have over 2,700 wolves in Minnesota today, the vast majority of which are in my district. In fact, over half the lower 48's gray wolf population is estimated to be found in Minnesota's 8th Congressional District. That said, we know that this figure is an extreme undercount by the magnitude, if not thousands more wolves are in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. When the gray wolf was listed as threatened under the ESA in 1978, a recovery goal of 1,250 to 1,400 wolves was set for Minnesota. It's clearly far beyond that. The first Trump administration issued a final delisting rule that was quickly litigated and blocked by a district court in, of all places, Northern California. Even the Biden administration, to their credit, sided with the science, agreed with the delisting, and defending this ruling. Can you please speak to your department's defense of this rule delisting the gray wolf? And can you commit today that the Trump administration will continue to follow the science and work to ensure the gray wolf is delisted?
Yes, absolutely, we'll follow the science, and we've got multiple examples, gray wolf and grizzly, where we've far exceeded the original goals set, in some cases by more than 2x. I've recently called the endangered species list the Hotel California. You can check in, you can never check out. There's 97% of the species that have gone on there have never been removed. We need to build the capability to celebrate when species come off this list as opposed to celebrate when they go on.
Thank you. I absolutely 100% agree with you. Does the Department of the Interior support congressional action to delist the gray wolf under the ESA?
Say again, Representative.
Mr. Secretary, does the Department of the Interior support congressional action to delist the gray wolf under the ESA?
Yes, and I think the science will back up the support for that.
Thank you very much. I have one question, but I only have 30 seconds left. I just want to make a comment. You are a breath of fresh air. You come from an energy state. You were an executive. And to hear you talk about the opportunities and the importance of strategic national security involving the mining space is a breath of fresh air. We must mine these critical minerals here in the United States and not depend on China like the former administration did. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Elfreth, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. We've talked a lot today about issues that are incredibly pressing: national parks, energy generation, public access. I want to lend my voice to many of those. But I'm going to first focus my time on the individuals who deliver those services for the American people and taxpayers. So it's my understanding that on February 14th, your department fired nearly 2,000 employees in critical positions, ranging from frontline park staff to scientists who prepare our public lands for extreme weather to employees who assist in addressing wildfires. Federal courts have since ordered agencies to reverse many of these wrongful terminations, and your department indicated in federal court filings last month that you had begun reinstating probationary employees. And just for the record, I want to state probationary simply means they were so brand new and eager in their public service, or they were so good at their public service they received a promotion. So first, can you tell this committee how many of these employees have been reinstated at Interior, and what employees who were fired in error have been rehired?
I believe that nearly everyone that was involved in that action has been extended an offer. I don't know specifically how many of them refused to return to their jobs, but we followed the court order to reinstate those jobs.
I'm glad to hear that. Could we possibly get that response in writing, those numbers in writing?
Yeah,
As soon as
I'm sure,
possible?
yep.
Thank you. And I completely appreciate that DOJ has a tendency to shoot first and aim second. So now that you have your feet under you as secretary, your busy season is just beginning. Can you give this committee any insight into your greatest personnel needs, and if you can commit to prioritizing those who have been fired in filling those greatest personnel needs?
Well, I think the place that we're focused on right now to want everybody to tell their constituents is that while we have added 6,100 summer staff, we still have some open recs for summer roles in the national parks. And so if anybody's looking to join the National Park Service for a summer temporary job, positions are still open.
We will share that with our constituents. Thank you. I want to move on to a program we haven't yet discussed today, which is the Historic Preservation Fund, something near and dear to my heart and my district. Congress appropriated $168 million in funding for the HPF this year, but we're 9 months into the fiscal year, and that money has yet to be released. It's frankly an unacceptable delay in funds that were bipartisanly appropriated by Congress. And it's resulted, as I'm sure you know, in states like Ohio and Arizona, either firing staff or, in one case, shuttering their historic preservation offices completely. In your Appropriations Committee hearing testimony, you said you're, quote, waiting on the apportionment to come out of OMB. Yet OMB has recently told preservation advocates that the FY25 HPF is being held up by the White House for review. Can you give us any insight which office is holding that critical funding up?
I don't know exactly where it's held up, but we'll dig into that.
I appreciate that. We're entering almost the 250th anniversary of this country's founding, and so those funds are critical in telling all the stories of Americans. I do want to move on, or keep on the Historic Preservation Fund just for a minute. You said in front of House Appropriations that Interior is focused on streamlining our core business operations, which will result in improved efficiencies and lower costs for American taxpayers. But I'm sure you know that those historic preservation funds are not actually taxpayer dollars. They didn't come from my taxes. They come from offshore drilling lease revenues paid for by oil and gas companies. So where is that money going, or where is it sitting right now? We're talking about, again, $168 million that should be directed to HPF, and it's just sitting somewhere.
I don't want to say that you lost me a little bit on where the fund that the 168 came from.
It comes from oil and gas lease revenues, not from taxpayers.
And you're saying that's held up somewhere?
That's what entirely my understanding makes up historic preservation funds, is those lease revenues, not your and my taxpayer dollars.
Gotcha.
So I'm just curious where that $168 million is sitting right now.
I'll dig into that.
Okay, I would greatly appreciate, again, there's some urgency here. States are shutting down their offices. This is a federal-state partnership. And again, we're coming up on a critical deadline. I'm just going to close out, and I appreciate your willingness to prioritize the rehiring of folks who were fired. I represent 44,000 federal employees in my district in Maryland, some of whom are your employees as well. And I just, Mr. Chair, I'm very sincere about you prioritizing those when you are restructuring, when you are rehiring, to respect the civil servants who have given of themselves and their families to this nation. And with that, I yield back.
As time has expired, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Arizona, Ms. Ansari. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for being here, Secretary Burgum. I'm just going to jump right into it. You seem to be quite concerned with any incentives for clean energy development, but as the president's ex-BFF, Elon Musk, keeps tweeting, folks often fail to mention the billions of dollars that go towards oil and gas subsidies. Secretary, do you know how much taxpayers subsidize fossil fuels each year?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of your question.
How much do taxpayers subsidize oil and gas each year?
Well, there are no direct subsidies against oil and gas, but there's the only thing that historically there was some tax preferential treatment. A lot of that went away with the IRA. The hundreds of billions that were driven towards solar and wind far exceed anything that's ever been given to the oil and gas industry.
Actually, according to the IMF, Secretary Burgum, in 2022, U.S. subsidies for fossil fuels totaled $757 billion. That's $3 billion in explicit direct subsidies and $754 billion in implicit subsidies like public health and environmental impacts. Now, putting aside the $754 billion in implicit subsidies in case you don't recognize the existence of sacrifice zones like Cancer Alley, let's focus on that $3 billion number. Are you familiar with the intangible drilling cost tax deduction, yes or no?
Yes, that's what I was referring to in terms of preferential tax treatment.
And do you know how much the subsidy costs taxpayers?
I know that it was removed in the IRA and doesn't exist today.
According to the Nonpartisan Congressional Research Service, the subsidy costs taxpayers $3.3 billion over a 5-year period. Do you know how long this deduction has been in U.S. code?
I think since the 1920s.
Since 1916, over 100 years. So I find it very hypocritical to say that renewables should be able to stand on their own by now. Another example, the percentage well depletion tax credit cost taxpayers nearly $4 billion over 5 years and has been in code since 1926. Foreign income tax exemptions cost taxpayers a whopping $33 billion over 5 years. But the tax code isn't the only way that fossil fuels take advantage of American taxpayers. This administration has opened up our public lands to oil and gas polluters, while Republicans in Congress are proposing forced lease sales, rock-bottom royalty rates, and countless giveaways to big oil billionaires in the big ugly bill. And this is all based on the idea that big oil will drill, baby, drill to lower energy prices for Americans. Now, Secretary Burgum, are you familiar with the FTC's findings that Pioneer Natural Resources and Hess Corporation CEOs colluded with OPEC, the foreign oil cartel, to keep production low and prices and their profits high? Yes or no?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So to be clear, FTC found evidence that Pioneer, Hess, and other oil corporations colluded with OPEC to price gouge Americans. 8 total corporations are now named in that class action lawsuit. Are you aware of how many of these corporations?
What was the time frame of that investigation?
All 8 held leases as of December of 2024.
Okay.
Are you monitoring how these companies use our public lands to ensure they are not engaging in anti-competitive practices that raise American energy prices? Just a quick yes or no.
I have zero belief that there's any collusion going on that would be raising prices. These are companies that have invested billions to try to generate more oil and gas, and when they do that, that helps lower the price.
So to clarify, if any of these companies are found civilly or criminally liable of collusion with OPEC to raise American energy prices, would they still be allowed to operate on our public lands and waters? Yes or no, please?
Well, I'd be shocked if these cases go forward because I don't believe that there's any substance there.
So is that a yes or no?
Well, I have to wait and see. I always follow the law, so we'll see what the court comes up with. But if the court comes up with something, I'm sure it'll be challenged because I don't think there's any substance there.
Again, it's a simple yes or no. If if they are found civilly or criminally liable of collusion, would they be allowed to operate on our public lands or waters?
The
Yes or
fact that
no?
the FTC or people in the Biden administration thought that somehow a few companies could collude on the price of a global market that's the largest daily market in the world is it's just kind of an impossibility. There's no way that a few people can control. There's so many players in that market, so many
Secretary,
countries.
From
it just
what
can't
I'm
be done.
hearing, under your leadership, not only will you not stop oil and gas companies from using our publicly owned resources to rip off the American people and raise energy prices, your department will instead double down on giving big oil control of our public lands and waters. I know my constituents don't want more handouts to big oil. They want clean, affordable, and renewable energy. Thank you. I yield back.